start. So welcome back, everyone, to our next group of presentations. We will hear again from Fabian, Henrik, Tejaswini and Induja and Dorle. So again, we will hear all these presentations in a row, and then we'll have a joint Q&A before the tea break. And just a reminder to the architects, we'll ring the bell after 20 minutes, and then again at 25 minutes. All right, and with that, I'll hand over to...
Okay, welcome. Yeah, it's a bit of a repeat of the presentation which I gave 2 weeks ago, because you all were not present, so I'm very happy that you're there. Also because after the feedback, what we had in the last session was so short, so quick, that I didn't really know how to move much on it. And it's great that you are here, and it's great that we have the time tomorrow to talk really about it. For me, the work was really about picking out one aspect of town planning, mobility, and I'm absolutely not a mobility planner. I really liked what Neha said, all these different types of mobility, and that's about my range of expertise in that. But it was, for me, felt it's the one which has the largest impact, which I feel driving around on a bike, in a car, walking in Oroville and the bioregion. So I picked that out, and it was really for me, and I'm not shying away to say, a kind of offering to see how can I bring together the image of the galaxy, its interpretation through the master plan right-of-ways, and land that in the context and see what really remains when I do that. How exciting does it become? It's something which I always wanted to do. I always felt like, hey, how does this image, which is not realistically implementable now, today, for many, many reasons, and I think it was never wished for to be a one-is-to-one model to be built. It's an ideation, it's a process. So for me, I always wanted to see how does that change when it comes into contact with the many aspects of life in this area. Yeah, maybe the next, Sophie. So there were a lot of basic assumptions which I put down for myself, not to offend anybody, but just for me, what's the framework? And also I did that work because for me it was unthinkable working on the crown and providing for the ideal version of the crown we all want, which is reduced traffic, e-mobility, non-polluting pedestrian. I still have to see what do I do with the traffic which is here and around us. How do I facilitate that to come as close as possible to providing the framework for that to happen. So in that sense, also the master plan, now soon to be reviewed, is something which is a process, as we are in a process. As an Aurovillian, as Aurovillians, as a community, we are in a process. We are not yet there where we shift tomorrow to community transport, to e-mobility, to cycles. We don't have it, we don't do it. So everything we do needs to be taken as a process. It needs to look at a time. And what I thought in the work that I do as a non-traffic planner, I pictured this could that be something which works in the range of the next 20 years, which again is the length of the next master plan. Sophie? So what I said, for now, motorized traffic and all will be part of our reality. And it's wished for that it gradually changes. And I'm willing to do my part. Also to mention what are key elements of any planning work. So we need to have the community being enabled by professionals to clearly define and formulate development priorities, bringing together vision and reality. We haven't ever done that. I think Suhasini started working on that quite a bit, but it's something which needs to be really anchored in the community and the enabling of the community to work on that. An up-to-date land use plan, again, something Suhasini worked in, which again is firmly rooted in the context based on community-agreed development priorities as an anchor for any meaningful study on mobility or any other town planning area. A review and a required update of the existing master plan, zonal detailed development plans, which then falls hopefully under your purview, regular implementation plans. All of this should be prepared by professionals in active collaboration with the Oroville planners, architects, and the members of the RA, with the governing board, the Secretary's office, the International Advisory Council, as consulting partners, advisors, and potential facilitators, especially when we are going into bioregional development work, liaison with central and state government structures. Next, please. So for me, it's really a call, a strive for unity. How do we unblock ourselves? And how do we unblock that, and how do we find ways? And this presentation strive to do that, looking at mobility as an important aspect of our daily lives. And this is why we kind of clubbed together. That particular work was then setting the frame for what Henrik did, who presents after me, what Tejaswini and Duja are doing, and then what Dorle is doing. So we all felt it really can link into each other. So a lot of this presentation will have pictures of Henrik, because it was one more detailed step from my kind of first ideal approach. Next, please. So we had this, so this is also all, I hope, at one point really shared in the next step when we present to the community. So these were all the existing bioregional roads. Next, please. Focusing into the city area, where we see that we have the national highway on the left. We have the East Coast Road running here. We have all these. We have the Bomayapalayam, Kuilapalayam, Edayan Chavadi, Moratandi, or Kudroad Road. Next. And this would be then a kind of thinkable traffic concept where we accept these roads as a given. We can't necessarily change them. They're often on Param book, or they are so established that they are just reality. We also look at villages and how can we address the impossible situation of heavy traffic of buses and all going through the villages, so trying to create bypasses wherever possible. Here at Irumbai, where I have the temple, which could be a very beautiful spiritual arrival point at the road from Kut Road over Red Earth Riding School, coming here next to the visitor center, or extending down to the road which goes to Oro Orchard, Hope, and then into Eda and Chavadi, or coming up from here, Bomayapalayam, Jaima corner, going a little bit up on the already paved road, and then bypassing Kuilapalayam village on the outer line of the master plan area. So, and another, I think next, this is what, so here I listed out the key elements of the mobility proposal as a summary. There are many, many more points. So the first would be really an in-depth study of the existing traffic situation, traffic patterns, and make reasonable assumptions for the near future. Lalit was a great inspiration with his development, or with his growth studies of the bioregion, looking at what constitutes non-Oroville traffic, Oroville traffic, the use of the existing road system to Oroville's advantage, upgrade it wherever it's meaningful, have efficient filtering and check systems in place to sort traffic into and through Oroville. Most important, to establish efficient relationships with the local administrators levels from the bottom up, unburden the neighborhood villages from excess traffic directed to Oroville via bypass systems, guide as much as possible all visitors' traffic to Oroville to come from the west, from the national highway, via designated roads bypassing Eda and Chavadi, block all traffic trying to use our roads to avoid the toll at Moratandi, which should be fairly easy, implement all the proposed master plan roads wherever they make sense, and with that create a very strong identity unique to Oroville by successfully overlaying this ideation onto the ground. And then what I said, being a process, allow for a gradual shift to e-mobility, shared transport, and encourage cycles, pedestrian movement. So this could provide a roadmap for the next 20 years. Next, please. This could be what I just had enlarged. This could be that image, and for me, it's still recognizable as the galaxy, but somehow become more alive and linked with the existing, not ignoring. If you look at all these images, there's really, I think there is one which shows the ocean. all the other images only show our circle. And that's it, and that is not enough. Next, please. So this was then going more, and I think this would be the next step to not only look at the mongooses who are part of our traffic, but imagine a villager from Matur, how would he cross to reach Edayan Chavadi? Look at the different user groups and see the scenarios for each of them, and then find ways of aligning that with our vision. So here we see the different roads. I have, for example, Certitude, which in all our proposals will be a large transport node. It will be a switch of, it will be a filtration system as it is now already. Of course, we need to support our security systems much more because that is, I think we have 38 different entry points into Oroville. So we need to somehow focus on protecting them. So that here, this is one major point. We keep, or maybe I should start with that one. This is for all the traffic, the 1 million visitors coming into Oroville every year. They would arrive from the west and would have an arrival point, maybe together with the line of goodwill, using the existing facilities, and switch, get to know Oroville, and then switch into a different mode of transport, and then go into the city. I have the existing road here from Certitude through here. I have the Crown Road, which can have different experiences. It could be, and I go to that next, maybe I do that next. And I have a large access here for the industrial zone from Kotakarai and just south of Alankupam. I can form a loop road with just the extension of existing roads over here. Next. And then focusing on the Crown, the idea was, and I borrowed a little bit from you, these jewels of the Crown, to have wherever the Crown interacts with the different zones, the different roads, different line of forces, different parks, we could have portals, focus points, which could have a very distinct character. So the whole experience, and I think this was very beautifully mentioned by Marie, so that the whole Crown is not one kind of singular experience, but it's really an expression of the diversity of the place, of the people, of the different contours. Yeah, next please. Then it goes here into sorting that a little bit more. So you could have, starting from here, I have the Solar Kitchen roundabout, which next to the one down here is another additional traffic switch. It's another filtration, parking. I have the Crown, the existing Crown here, so I could have a small plaza here where the Vikas radial starts. I could have another one here just south of the private land over here. I have a large potential of a beautiful public plaza at the cultural zone. I could imagine here, using this road here, I can create almost an ideal version of the Crown as I dream it, with pedestrian, with e-mobility. It's not too long. This must be what? This must be 1 kilometer maybe. And I could create already now a very beautiful sequence of places connected. Here I have then, next to Savitri Bhavan, I could have one beautiful link which further filters the visitors towards the Matre Mandir. I have one here at where the loop road which I keep for the internal international zone traffic meets the Crown, meets the archaeological heritage. At the same time, I have traffic coming in from Kotakarai and the more informal Bharatipuram arriving into Oroville. Then I have a bypass around Darkali, which I think, and I'm really happy, most of the people here took that as a really kind of natural way of thinking that the traffic could be guided around sensitive areas. Then here again, I meet the industrial zone where partially the Crown is already built. Here I have youth center, vocational training, again a filtration. And one main idea is also that, which was also discussed then in the feedback sessions, in my view, this should be really gradually decreasing traffic. I have the filter down, I have another filter here, I have the outer ring down here, so that by the time I reach the cultural zone and the schools, it's almost non-motorized, fossil fuel motorized polluting traffic. It's just cycles, slow-moving traffic, community transport, if and when available. Next, please. So here we have a little bit of the general feedback provided in the last week. So it was an overall appreciation that the approach takes a realistic look at the overall situation, focuses on mobility, something we all experience in our life. A general agreement that any work on the Crown needs to look at the wider context. Maybe that was also a shortcoming in our dream weaving, that we focus only on positive feedback. Maybe that can be reviewed, no, because sometimes critical, negative feedback can be extremely helpful. It was very much appreciated to look at the dense situation in and around Oroville in the local neighborhoods of Kuilapale, Eda and Chavadi. A general appreciation that the existing roads are seen and used as a given reality, an opportunity for effective and neighborly collaboration, and a chance to use while we are exploring forward-looking and sustainable traffic solutions inside Oroville. Next. Discussions of advantages of keeping access via the 30 route or via a new radial. I show that. The appreciation of how the proposal aims to find ways to route motorized traffic around sensitive areas, Darkali, Bliss, even Silence in the industrial zone. A big appreciation of the attempt to deal creatively with the symbolic expression of the outer ring in sensitive areas such as the northeastern transition to the Greenbelt. We have Gaia Forest, Samridi Forest, Revelation with its very unique sanctuary. The positive feedback on how this crown is defined by the sequence of portals, jewels in the various segments. It shows that, by the way, that other dream weavers have taken up the works, shows a general agreement with an approach of looking from outside into Oroville. We need to look at development strategies, need to be influenced and based on socio-economic planning policies. And then it was important to look at how to implement this approach to mobility, what are possible stages and phases, I come to that, and an appreciation of how this proposal aims to bridge the different interpretations on how to build Oroville. Next, please. So here we have the master plan right-of-ways with the lines of forces. Next. Then comes that image on where I have been trying to work on, abstract at times, no, especially when you're looking at these areas and it doesn't consider individual buildings and all. Next, please. And then this is where I then took in, or where Hendrik based his work on mine, and I found it very, very fitting. So this was then his interpretation of that road system. Next, please. And then maybe in another 6 years, Oroville could look in parts already like that. And to me, it's a strong image. It's something which is still recognizable as a very unique urban form, which I think is fitting with Oroville's understanding and larger purpose. And it's connected. It really respects the ground realities, trying to make the best out of a difficult situation. It shows the existing building fabric with an overlay of what is to come if we want to have a larger city. So now the focus would be just to see, next please, to zoom into different areas. And so here down, this would be the residential sector 2, 3, 4, 5, with the highlight, then the line of Goodwill. So we have, and there was a discussion really on, do I keep this road, which is there for us since 53 years? Do I keep that, or do I open up another radial over here and have an access into here? I believe while having that road, it offers us a great potential. It's there, it's funded by government money, so I can't easily undo it. And it really allows us to work as an immediate step, start from here. We have to talk to the landowner here. But is this already 20? 2 minutes. Ah, okay. So good. So it allows us to really build the most ideal version of the crown that we are capable of right now. With this is in discussion, this is there. I don't think there is much there is no resistance. I think everybody is really waiting to start with something like that. At the same time, we can use that entrance here, and this needs to be seen what that becomes, and work on this segment of the outer ring, which we did already, which is part of your planning. I think you presented it to the governing board. So this would be also really great as an interface between Auroville, Ede and Chavadi, as an active laboratory of how bioregional planning collaboration can work. One needs to see if there is maybe, if we use that for parts of the visitors who come, who are not coming from the west, do they park over here? We have these structures are potential parking structures. Parking structures will become a building typology which we have to look, and it's nothing to be afraid of. They can be beautiful green. They could be ideally done in such a way that 10, 20 years down the line, they can be converted into public spaces, work hubs and all. But we need to be aware that a large part of these areas need to go at that time. So maybe visitors go over here, stop, and then I have a shuttle from the visitor center or the entrance portal of the line of goodwill. Needs to be seen. So again, I don't think we can have one DDP. It must be a sequence of many DDPs dealing with all of that. I found right now, for me personally, I would love to see that road being upgraded, talking with people over here, accepting them as a reality, using that, and with that have the chance to really work on that. Next, please. So I've listed this. We can also, I'm happy that we have a bit more time tomorrow to discuss about that. Just what are the elements, what types of traffic could I imagine? Next, please. Then going on the other side, so here, residential sector 2 and 1. Similar, I support with a part of the master plan road. In my first layout, it went until here, until the Sukhavati is here, Sukhavati Canyon. And then Henrik worked further on it, creating an internal road where you have, ideally you park your car here, but if you have a priority access because you are either aged or you need the car for whatever, then you have the chance to drive up to your neighborhood. So you can park here or here, using partially the existing road system, respecting the existing build fabric. All of this assumes that the land purchase acquisition is a given, that in the city area we have most of the land, or we have nice understandings with the local landowners on how to co-develop their interests and Auroville interests. Next, please. So here, traffic expected here, for example, would be internal private vehicles parked at centralized locations, which then again could become neighborhood plazas with small, I don't know, thrift shops and laundrettes and small hospitality parts. Strong focus on slow-moving, non-polluting traffic, connection to an Auroville community transport system. You can still see it a little bit. I could imagine the school bus going along that route, and kids who are in this, they use that, they walk here. This is all then perfectly walkable. There's a pickup point here and then goes further to the cultural zone. Next, please. Here we come to the cultural zone. And this again, I would not even, so ideally I don't have any through traffic from here towards the industrial zone over here. Also, industrial zone traffic is largely taken care of by the industrial loop roads from the Kotakarai Alankupam roads, and I have the road coming in from the northeastern Greenbelt coming in here. It's remaining, but there is hardly any traffic on it. So the traffic would really stop here. If I have larger events, I have the stadium, of course I have to deal with traffic coming in and I need adequate parking. There was the idea of creating, to further free this part from through traffic, to establish a road here along in between the green corridor and the sports area, coming from here and ending up somewhere at Dana, carefully cutting through it, not really disturbing much of the beautiful kind of sanctuary forest what we have over here. So this is one which further would allow people, if they have to come from here, they could go here and then down here. And then furthermore, I could have another, I think Tejaswini will maybe talk about it. There is another bypass behind Kalabhumi to really create an almost pedestrian, very active, alive cultural zone. Yeah, Yeah, next, please. Next. Here is that industrial zone loop. So you have here is present-day Vindara, Kotakarai. And Kotakarai is one, I think it's fairly easy to have bypass solutions for Edayan Chavadi, Irumbai, Kuilapalayam. Kotakarai is a bit difficult. It goes straight through it. The most part of Kotakarai is further to the east, but still it's cutting through the village. So we have one entry here at Mango Garden, the Mangalam radial. We could have another one which is also, I think, underway with the TDC. It stops presently, wait. Yeah, it stops here somewhere. This is what now? 25, okay. So anyway, so this we can also, I'm really happy to look at that tomorrow and see if this kind of seems realistically. And it has to be said, all these roads cut somewhere across over the comfort zone of people who live there. And you need to deal sensitively with that, talk with the people, explain why, have the community involved. And I think if you do that, then there is a large acceptance for change in individual and in community life. Yeah, here there is another one. So you would come here from, this is the Integral Learning Center and Natural Mont Café. You cut over here, you go to Orosajan, CSR campus coming down. This stretch is existing here. Here's the youth center. So this could be really a beautiful loop of the, and I heard that in some conversations, this could be really the next part. Next to the residential zone, we could at the same time develop the crown here in the industrial zone. Next, please. Yeah, next. And then it comes to the international zone starting from Darkali. So again, you would, and I didn't mention this, so the existing road comes here, and this would be for me only Oroville internal traffic, yeah, which is routed around, I think Marie had it also, which is routed around the lake, pushed further from where it is to go towards the admin area, and then further to the existing road on the north of Sincerity and Darkali back to the international zone. So I have the bypass road around Darkali. We discussed if it's closer to here or if it's closer to here. Again, with the Kali temple potentially becoming a really beautiful kind of anchor point. Yeah, the traffic here. This again, no, it could be a really beautiful sequence of plazas on the crown, which is in this concept so far relatively open for all types of traffic. Next, please. Next, so this is then the focus on the crown, and next, please. And these are just step-by-step implementations of what could be possible right now. So find ways to unite the majority of the community behind a shared vision, a concerted effort on land protection, land acquisition in collaboration with the Oroville Foundation, your office, the state and central government, and the Oroville International Centers to help with fundraising. Establish effective bioregional communication channels, establish effective access control points, toll gates from the national highway, strengthen the Oroville security system, decide on the upgrade of the Certitude Solar Kitchen Road as provisional 10 years plus, second transport switch at the Solar Kitchen roundabout, which many fellow architects have been kind of working with. Start planning on the segments of the crown that we have. What I said, either the existing one, the one on Michael Bonke's land, or the stretch from clockwise from the Solar Kitchen. Improve with small interventions, like again, Tanya and all said, the existing paved stretch of the crown, and start with community-wide consultation processes to actively involve the RA. That's it. So I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you, Fabian.
Yeah.
And yes, as he mentioned, there will be time tomorrow as well to ask more questions to each of the architect teams. So we'll have kind of an open space in the morning, and I will describe it again later. Just to mention, I made a small mistake when I described the pre-tea break. So we'll hear all 4 presentations, then there will be a tea break, and then we'll have the Q&A, because listening to 4 presentations is quite a lot. So we'll have a break then before going into the Q&A. So our next presenter is Henrik, and I see he's ready to go. Over to you.
All right.
Oh, Sophie's not. But I think we're almost there.
Yeah, so my name is Henrik. Is it on? Okay. Okay. The connection goes all the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So left click forward, right click backward.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of start where Fabian left off, just putting in some points that maybe were not so forefront in the previous presentation. So generally, I was pretty happy that we were able to come together and kind of come to a plan where a lot of people could agree on, at least the 6 of us who sat last week together. So for me, being pretty new in Orville, my starting point was to kind of go through all the previous planning that existed. And so that's why I also started kind of overlaying all the existing plans and trying to get an understanding what the planning situation is, and then also picking up on the current discussions and mainly also building on Fabian's input. And so the 3 main points that I started off looking at the traffic was the no interference with Kotakurai, minimizing the cutting and parting of the forest with the outer ring road. And so the pointer works. Oh shit.
This one.
All right, thanks. So, and generally, the thinking of how to reduce the traffic on the ground to allow for a pedestrian zone in the residential zone. And I don't want to repeat too much what Fabian said. One point for me that was interesting is that in Suhasini's plan, she included a number of deviations in the plan, which also includes kind of this cutting through here. Her version goes more here. And altering the radii up here, and also moving the outer ring a little inside here so that you don't have to demolish as many houses. And one major feedback in the last round was also to take the entrance serious, the proposed entrance from the 99 master plan. And I think this is very valid to kind of, if we as Orville want to have some proper welcoming gesture, then it should be planned. And so one trick then to use this entrance and still have a bypass was this kind of connecting road, which then goes again outside. In this version, I included also the transport node, which is in the 99 plan. I think there's not much that speaks against it, actually. And for a first step to solve the parking solution, maybe to get something in place like a car sharing, we could have parking houses here, right at the entrance, and the visitors parking here. Okay. Yeah, and maybe one point that I kind of find important is also to think that maybe we keep using these roads, but there are different points where this road can be cut, like in the entrance here or with a line of goodwill there. So to kind of to make the inner zone more calm. I think it's my phone, yes. Yeah, and I try to become a little, to get a little bit more specific with the plazas around the crown and identifying centers where it would kind of be natural to have these plazas. The one historic community space is the Solar Kitchen, and with the beginning of the then pedestrian zone, the promenade, you also could call it, you would have one big plaza, maybe the biggest. Then where the radials meet the crown, in front of the line of goodwill, then there's already a kind of established axis, which is also from Suhasini's proposal for the development of the international zone. So one major plaza here on that axis, maybe one secondary, then in the middle of the industrial zone, just at the heart, in the center between the lines of force. One small comment, there was a lot of discussion around, okay, what to do with these lines of force that are crossing these canyons here. And for me, I found interesting that in Anupama's plan, this problem doesn't really show up because she already moved one line of force, and the other one she just left out. And I think it makes a lot of sense to just avoid this issue. Then the youth plaza, quite naturally along the crown, and maybe one cultural plaza in front of Kalabumi, establishing the heart of the cultural zone. And this maybe could be a place where you would have a little bit of nightlife in Oroville, where some cafes could also be open until 10 or something. And in the second part, maybe shared traffic, not totally pedestrian, of the crown along the residential zone. There would be only minor public places, one at the entrance and one in front of Humanscapes is already kind of established, maybe needs some improvement. One major question that for me then came up was also a discussion that I picked up in the process that, so on the one hand, what Roger's, I think, tried to do with the typologies around the crown is to have it very permeable. So he also has made this graphic showing how this permeable typology, mostly up on stilts, leaving the ground floor open in a lot of places, allows for movement. But then he puts the road in front of all that, and the road becomes kind of secondary. And for me, it's a feeling that this then becomes the actual barrier. And for me to solve that problem was to not make the road just a service road, but really make the road a center. And so anyway, as you saw before in the traffic plan, we tried to make the area in front of the residential zone pedestrian. So there's actually no need to have the pedestrian zone apart from the actual crown road. So then the idea was, okay, what makes the crown road connect inside out? And my idea was more that if you really bring density up to the road and the road becomes the center, then it actually connects both sides. And you can see the interplay of the major major plazas, finding these spaces, and also interlinking them with green, opening at least 2 of the main plazas up to the green space, and having the water catchments around the crown. And one thing that when I try to kind of get an idea of what is happening in this pedestrian zone, what kind of typology suggests itself by what is there on the ground, taking into account that I kind of would want to create density to make the crown important and connecting. That maybe in the first part, from the Solar Kitchen Plaza to the first Radial Plaza, it could be very dense and city-like, maybe even G+2, G+3. And then in the middle, there's the part where the crown intersects with the Joy community, and you have a kind of loose ensemble which is around the crown. And maybe this could be picked up on, and so a kind of village theme could be created there. And then towards, and then you might have a cut for a green corridor, and towards the line of goodwill, the structures would get bigger and bigger. So it's the 3 themes, the dense city, the village, the megastructure. Yeah, so you kind of see the more loose ensemble, and then with one line of force touching the crown, then starts the next theme. Yeah, and there I just have 2 versions. One not including the green corridor in front of this line of force, and here it's there. Yeah, and one major angle for me to kind of get a sense of urban planning was the writing of Christoph Alexander, because I really appreciate how he understands space making and all that. And he also, the most well-known architecture book actually of the 20th century is The Pattern Language, where he created kind of encyclopedia of well-functioning patterns in architecture, and this concept was quite influential, even laying the groundwork for Wikipedia and stuff like that. And I go so much in detail because I think it could maybe be also something how Auroville could communicate with Vastu Shilpa and evaluate the specific points of discussion to really have a good dialogue going forward. And in that manner, I brought also a few ideas of how these patterns could look like. So the main thing is you try to really coin a term that it becomes graspable, a clear problem statement, then a discussion, ideally with a lot of scientific input, and then a solution of how do you want to solve this problem. So, and one pattern which I think could work well for the crown, and it's also picking up a little bit on one pattern by Christoph Alexander, the public outer room, would be the creation of communal spaces along the crown, and so wherever these, or maybe wherever the vistas of the Matrimandia cross with the crown, this is actually an idea of the previous dreamweaving sessions, 2005 to 2008. Wherever these vistas cross the crown, you would have one of these communal spaces at the four main axes, you would have a bigger one, maybe even reflecting the geometric shapes of the four powers of the mother. So you would have a hexagon here, then a triangle in the international zone, a square in the industrial zone, and a circle in the cultural zone. Yeah, and so here are just some references how these spaces could look like, or how it could be artfully interpreted. Also, the idea being thinking about traditional iconic spaces, plazas. You often have the church as the main focus, or what is the actual main building that the community values, and that then these communal spaces could be that structure, which really, in an artistic form, celebrate the community. Yeah, and a second element is kind of picking up on this theme of the classical plaza. So you would have the church and the tower. If water towers could actually be this vertical element, really putting the water towers at the center of attention at these plazas, making them really pristine, and maybe even as viewing towers. And yeah, so this is the classical example, San Marco, and here's one modern interpretation in Britain, where you have the community's town hall and a viewing tower next to it, and other modern examples of how the vertical element can come into the plazas. Other patterns that I didn't put too much thought into was, to create shade on the ground, so along the residential zone. We would have on the south side creating the density, so it would make a lot of sense to create these buildings in a way that they would provide a lot of shade. And so then to consider the typologies for these south side buildings, so that they have large roof overhangs and arcades and going deep into the street. And then apart from that, also what other shading elements could be interesting for placemaking. One pattern that I picked up from Vastushilpa is actually having these water catchments along the crown, where the crown kind of creates this bun, at least, nearly all the way in the residential zone. That this typology of the catchment pond with gabions, so you would have a kund, which is a percolation pond at the same time. And so here, just to kind of make a case for density and make it visible how it could look like with these different elements. So this would be the hexagon as the communal space, a town hall, the water tower, and then some amphitheater with some shading structure, and these typologies which have deep facades can also allow for green and go far into the street with their roofs. Again, the view on the Solar Kitchen Plaza. I mean, this is a little exaggerated with a water tower, but to get an idea. This is a market hall that could be where Foodling is now. And this could be the second plaza at the radial, again with a communal space along one of the vistas, a water tower at the edge of the building, and the catchment pond. And this briefly shows the different possibilities to use different road widths and still get a good amount of shading. So whenever you get beyond like 14 meters, you would need at least 2 lines of trees, and this is where I think what would be more preferable. And this is just basically the annex to see what these pattern languages can give for input. So this is there's 2 main books which I referenced here, and so this is for later digestion if anyone is interested. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. Our next presenters are Tejaswini and Induja. There you go.
How does this work?
I didn't do anything.
You wanna come here?
No, it's okay. You want to pass your slide by yourselves?
Yes.
Left click forward, right click backwards.
Okay. We will experiment. Right click, left click forward. Forward. Did it go? Hello, everybody. We'll do a little recap of what we had done so far. So starting with the grounding principles, more about the content and character, which is not only about the road along the crown, but all the projects that come along, the spaces that come along. Social and water connectivity, social connectivity and water connectivity, because we have emphasized a bit on water in our coming slides. Movement, we're looking at this more as a unifying passing space and not as heavy traffic on the crown. And looking at the urban spaces. So here we are basically saying create more coherent spaces and let the projects or the activities which come along the crown relate to the larger whole and not look at only as just piecemeal in itself. Oh, that's too fast. Right. Okay. So I won't go into details because this we touched upon last time quite a lot. Just a quick thing, we looked at the water flow, the way it is flowing. According to that, we kind of created different catchment, water catchments. These could be either reused or recharged depending on the kind of development which is there around. And the idea is to basically create some kind of soft landscaping elements around those water bodies so that they're not left alone, but they are maintained properly. Based on the feedback last time, we tried to look at the geometry and put the water along that. So what you see here is, it looks very rigid as a form, but when we go into the details, it will look a little different. And anyway, we're looking at galaxy as more as a geometry, and we have been so flexible all this while, so we have taken little liberty. I mean, starting from the north that keeps changing to the lines of forces, number of lines of forces that, that are always varying, I think. Yeah.
And the notable thing here is that the water management is an iterative process. It's not that it's going to be like this forever. And somebody pointed out in the morning that the water that is there in the galaxy is looking different. It's more flowing and everything. So what we can do is, from here we can move towards that, because we will be having more density and the runoff will be much more higher. So we will work out a different, the strategy will be evolving as we are developing. Yeah.
Why does it go so fast? So this movement, we won't go into the details because Fabian has already touched on it. There is one, looking at crown more as a continuous experience and less of a vehicular. So you will see that different details that we have worked on would actually show more of that. The place where we have done different is here. We are not doing this motorized at all, but going around it, and we'll come to that when we are actually detailing out that stretch. And just a quick thing, this sector 3, 4, 5 in residential zone is cycle path only. Then we continue as a motorized path, motorized road, vehicular road. Through Darkali till the end of that little radial that's coming in here right now is only cycle path. Sorry, this is Darkali. Going further here was again motorized, vehicular. Sorry, I'm so used to saying motorized, but I think vehicular is the better. Youth, YC Bliss, again cycle path and keeping the loop as it is. This is what I just now explained, keeping this as cycle path or pedestrian. And then sector 1 and 2 is more of staying as it is, but somehow to enrich the experience on that stretch, which we will touch upon in coming slides. But also we had said that we could try and time out the access to this. And in the evenings, throughout the night till early morning, it could be closed for vehicular. So at least evening life could be experienced without really much of the cost involvement. Anything? So looking at the human experience, basically, the kind of spaces that we've created all along, we're trying to see how we can experience the crown. So when you come to the junction of Matri Mandir Visitor Center, there is a kind of there are tourists there, and also there's kind of a diversity there where it's also an initiation for many people to kind of, being in Auroville. Going further is archaeological site here, so it's kind of a connection with past. Then you pass through Darkali, which is basically to be with nature, build relationship with nature, different forms of lives. Going further is a kind of exchange. There is a trade. This is industrial zone. So trade of nature, there would be a lot of learning spaces, interaction spaces. Going through YC Bliss, what we are looking at is more of a youth-related activities, so there is a playfulness. Going further is a cultural zone, and here the kind of things we have proposed is a campus-like thing. I mean, many of you have done that, but a lot related to different kinds of learnings. And again, there is a park, and residential zone would be if we try and manage to create a social life there and bring some cheerfulness. That is what we are actually looking at. I won't go into the details of placemaking. This we had basically just said that we are looking at only 5 to 7 years. We've referred to master plan document and Roger's sketches, and looking at the current needs also. And these are different proposed facilities that in last presentations we had touched on, so I won't go into the details.
We picked a few which makes more sense in the next 5 to 7 years that can be immediately implemented. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the master plan? Yes.
Yeah. And so this is where we start. So last time we tried to look at 16.7 as right of way and worked around that. So within there was a flexibility that we had kept between 2.5, 3.1, you all know those numbers. So we kind of, we tried to rearrange them and made it, that time the aim was basically to see how we can get social landscape spaces, give them more priority. That still remains, but over last 2 weeks, we had a detailed contemplation and also a lot of feedback that we got last time. Now what we're trying to do here is actually fixing 2.5 meters as infrastructure corridor, and mainly for the HT and LT line and maybe OFC also, because we have that, we need that ring as per the electrical master plan. So that could remain there. But we felt to give the kind of experience that we're talking about, if we clear out that 16.7, we are losing a lot. And that also got confirmed by the presentation that we had, and basically do the planning, other planning first, and infrastructure would fall in place according to the planning that you make. So assuming that water and wastewater would be decentralized and yet have a place in that 2.5 meter ring where you could at times plug in and facilitate along the crown. What you see here is basically the darker gray is vehicular, which is 4 meters, and that's not always along the crown ring. It is going in and out. This is of course conceptual. It's so it's at times in, at times out. Yeah, and the other aspects that we are trying to cover this time through different, we've done plans and sections of many of these where we are looking at the climate, looking at the microclimate, appropriate trees, placements for the shade, for built and unbuilt spaces. You have to say something.
Yeah, the main essence of it is not looking, because 16.7 was constraining us a lot, and we're creating the unnecessary challenges. So what we try to do is keep that flexible, and like somebody mentioned, take the crown, widen the crown even more, and the crown is more of a people experience, so give more emphasis on people's experience here.
So that's why the social landscape spaces are way larger than actually just the passing space.
Yeah. And we try to kind of create social landscape spaces every 200 meters. So from a point within a 5-minute walking radius, you will land up in a resting space. Oops. So that was it. So to start with the residential zone sector 1 and 2, which we connect with a lot. So this area we try to see first how the sun is affecting the area, and if we have a wider road, how it is actually affecting, because we experience it every day. So then with the 4-meter road, so this is the 4-meter road which will go which is already existing, and then there is a 2.5-meter infrastructure corridor that will go, and the rest of the space which is on the other side is totally like that becomes as a space where the buildings are set back, and create spaces and all those things. So here what we try to do in this is Sante. So here this is more like so here the road comes, and then the road kind of deviates so that the ambulance drop point is there near to Sante, and then there is a water body here around which the Sante campus can expand, and that kind of water is also good for healing and everything. And then there are other water bodies which are more public spaces which are there, and then here can be also more wellness related things and everything. So the thing is, here if you see, there is a courtyard like space which was also we tried to get from the galaxy. So there were nice courtyards on the which was falling on the center of the crown. So we tried to create those kind of things with the shade elements. So for example, this is the road that we said will close after 5. So when it closes, and there are several of them in different places in different forms, when we close them, that space can be taken up by something else, and there can be an activity. So it's really a room in the street. And then as we go along here, this is humanscape, and then there is another water body that can be coming there, and around that is kind of the stepped environment, which is again a seasonal water body. So, and when there is no water, it can be a nice interactive space, some performances can be happening and all those things. And then and then here if you see, it sits forward in that space. It does not come on the road but sits forward. So and in the evening the road also becomes like the whole space, and there is no curb that we are thinking of. So another courtyard here again, and then this is Kalpana, and then there is a colonnade that is already going, and then there are some trees. And here we try to see again we second the point that Ganesh mentioned, that instead of looking at avenue trees, we use trees like how it can help either as a visual barrier, either as a noise barrier, to provide shade. All those kinds of things we have explored. So here is another courtyard. So around evening there can be some small kiosks put up, and it can be totally different, and then it becomes a road again. So that was the idea here. And
so in this stretch, knowing that north is up, there is a lot of, we all know that this road has always been very sunny. So what is important is to build across and close knit, have trees which would give shade and noise barriers, etc. So that's very important also climatically, to organize those spaces, to have that stretch of road more usable and more as, like we say, street as a room. Yeah.
So these are some of the sections. If you see, this is the road, like the 4-meter road, and then the 2.5 infrastructure. And then we try to show what is happening around, and because it's a continuous experience, not only along the crown but across the crown. So this is the courtyard that we are talking about, and here can be some already room for kiosks, and that can become active. This can become seating area for dining and all those things. And there is a nice corridor which is leading inside to a nice water body. And then This is another section, this is in front of library, and this is in front of, this is Kalpana, and in front of Kalpana again the road is there. There is something happening. So this building is set in the social landscape space, but it gives a walkway. So that's another exploration. And we also tried to explore some of the species that can be used for providing shade, which are evergreen and TDF species, which you will see here.
Yeah,
and
thanks to Glenn and Islin to help us with that.
Yeah. So this is another section in front of, this is humanscape, and in the background. So this is the water body that I was talking about here. And another thing is, in these spaces, the way that we have created in front of humanscape and in front of Kalpana basically, during this monsoon there were, for 3 days there were water above the crown actually. So that clearly shows that we have not made ways for water. So we should, so here instead of undoing the road and doing that again, we can let the water flow on the crown, and we make a nice small dip above. So the water is flowing, mongooses can cross, and all those things can happen. And then still we have a road, which are also again a speed barrier. So if you have a straight road, and so that's like a speed breaker, little gradually. So this is the thing, and then this is near Sante. Again, there is in the background the street as a room happening, and then the infrastructure corridor can be covered with shade elements. Yeah. So this is sector 345, and here somewhere is PTDC and solar kitchen. So this is, you see, this is all adopted from the Galaxy model. And the nature of the social spaces that we are providing every 200 meters is not always active, not like, you know, something is always happening here. So we are looking at a scale where it's very active, like in the sector 1 and 2, to a scale where it's only a simple banyan tree with benches around, and you have a place to sit and introspect and, you know, have your own time. So those kind of things. And there is a big potential in these spaces from today to how it will develop tomorrow, that as the density is growing, as the needs are growing, they can be also transformative. So today it can be very simple, tomorrow there can be a active life around it. So again, yeah, so here we are saying only cycle path and a little raised cycle path, allowing the water to go through, because this road is not existing now. We're not redoing anything, we can do it as we allow the water inside. So yeah, and the whatever traffic is crossing from here to the communities that are here, the Oro Dam and other places, will not be able to cross through or run on the crown. We will have barriers that will cut them off. They'll be just able to move. So that's the kind of section, and you know, there is a lot that we can do. And here again the water bodies are in and out. As it is along the crown, it can be more active. As it is away from the crown, the nature is more calmer, more intimate, and those kind of things. And so coming to international zone, we have taken this area from Unity Pavilion to Language Lab, which has a very significant space of the archaeological the site. Okay. So here we are saying, go to the section. So yeah, this is again the 6.5 continues. The important thing is because we have the area of importance, we have this little deviation of the motorized road, but still the cycle path and the walking experience continues along the crown. This is to respect the...
And also we could easily make archaeological site as part of the social space.
Yeah. So, and we have this kind of underground experience where we have the live museum and everything. So this is where we talked about the human experience. It's really to the scale, and we are connecting with the past, so that is very important. So Darkali, as we go, the main idea is to keep the edges active with activities that are happening in the industrial zone and international zone, and then keep only the cycle path through, because if we do much here, then we are kind of disturbing the ecosystem that is there. But it's an enriching experience for us to have it. So we're doing as minimal as possible here. and trying to coexist with all forms of life. So it's not only trees and it's not only those things, it's all forms of life that we have, and they play a huge role in our ecosystem balance.
So coming to industrial zone, I think many of you have done this. Don't look at the number of lines of forces. Again, it confused us because at times it was 4, at times it was 6. But what we're saying is basically the low-lying buildings along the crown could come up now, and actually this stretch of road could be developed pretty soon. Because, I mean, of course, along with the interlink that Fabian talked about and the industrial zone access and all, but we could actually start developing this and give that urban form, because here lines of forces are creating a very positive impact on the development which would come along the crown. This is just a skyline that it would create. I mean, that's it. The way it's right now, it's showing very solid blocks, but if we give the porosity, it can be very interestingly done. So spaces-wise, we were, like earlier we had said, we could actually bring spaces, bring offices and collective spaces which would cater to industrial zone, like retail stores, like courier services, and also borrowing from different zones to create a nightlife in this, like Shivangi and Radhika had talked about. This is YC Bliss Forest. So here, I think we will have to, knowing that this is a park, we will have to bring back some green now. So we could do that more thoughtfully. We have people who know which kind of trees should be planted and stuff like those. Here, what we are focusing on mainly is to create unbuilt spaces, but organize them in a way that it responds to the footprint, it responds to the need of actually what was existing there. So youth, when we say, is not only restricted to the youth center, but could be enlarged to a very beautiful, in a very beautiful manner. So we could create spaces which would have these kind of events and the activities which are youth related or even otherwise. Yeah, we are talking about this stretch more as just a cycle path. That's the section, which is 2.5. Stays because HT ring and electrical stuff can go through that. And also, if required, other things could plug in and go through that. You can see the way these spaces are. They could be very semi-open spaces with tree shades and stuff like that. Cultural zone is where we are saying we could develop this whole stretch more as a campus. And that's why we are sticking to just the cycle path and pedestrian along all this. This dotted line which you saw all along was 690, just 2 minutes. Yeah. So, and have a vehicular road which is a little bit offsetted on outer side. So you can see this is Kripa, and that's Kalabhumi. So if you see the scale of the hexagons we're not talking of something very, very big. There are a lot of existing kaya trees here, so it will be challenging to see how we incorporate those and actually build into those. So that's going to be very interesting. Anything? So that's the section through there. What we're saying is 2.5 again stays here. The water flows along and could become social spaces, meeting spaces. They're just some pictures from different campus learnings.
There can be night street plays happening right on the crown. So when it's kind of not defined, then we can define it with activities, not with space or any enclosure. That is also a possibility.
Yeah. well, this is a lot of text is missing on this. I don't know why, but this is the public shuttle service exploration that we had done last time. There was a lot of appreciation, so we put it here. But I guess we are running out of time. I will.
The main things are the shuttle route, and then the
stop points.
Dots are the stop points, which have the cycle pool, which will allow you to go explore further in the zones and then come back and again take a shuttle back. Yeah. So the pink lines are the 5-minute walking radius from the drop points, and green lines are the 5-minute cycling radius. Pretty much the whole city area is covered from these drop points in 5 minutes cycling.
Yeah, I think that's all. That's all. I'm coming.
Thank you, Tejaswini and Induja. Our next and final presentation for this session is from Dorle. There she is. And then after that, we will break for tea and have the Q&A after the tea time.
Good afternoon, everybody. I had the idea to incorporate lots of feedback, and I made a lot of lists, but I think it kind of took in a different direction. So I incorporate as much as, the feedback, and incidentally, it kind of corresponds to a lot of the headers of the questions, so that was kind of interesting. Let's go back. So the main point where we started was what is important: air, water, trees, the soil, was kind of what led to this. I say we because I started out initially with Pavneet, but she dropped out because she got sick and ran out of time. So we started by putting in the term porosity and proportions, because somehow at that point, it was just after the monsoon, it felt very important to us, the porosity of the soil, which lets the water percolate, and it's very obvious in certain parts of Oroville how it's different. And then taking that further, Islan had this nice picture of the healthy soil, which is permeable, and the unhealthy soil, which is again relates. So I just stole that image from there, borrowed it, sorry. And so exploring this further, it leads to the porosity also of cities, of the streets, of the buildings. So I just explored all this further, and there's some recap and some not recap. So looking at the wind, how do buildings affect the wind flow? So these are just studies, and this one is orientated with an easterly wind, but we have actually more southerly wind, southeast, south. But the principles stay the same. It's leaving space for the wind, orientating vegetation to shade the buildings, to ensure that the wind is able to pass. And we have the advantage that it works very well here because we have the southerly wind, and we want to shade always on the north, on the west and the east side, in order to allow for the low sun, the trees to shade the buildings from the low sun in the morning and in the afternoon, because the south and the north facades we can shade with overhangs. So then going back into the porosity and what happens in urban environments when the more buildup there is, more impervious surfaces, it increases the runoff and it reduces the capacity for the ground for the water to percolate into the ground. So it's something what we have to, while we develop the city, we have to take into consideration that we have this water and we have the climatic situation of having this very short stretch of the monsoon where we have a lot of water. So we always have to keep that very much in the forefront of our minds when planning anything and reduce or minimize the impervious surfaces. And that also, I mean, again, the porousness translates also to buildings in general. So I try to take a little bit of a bigger building. So just letting in the light, the daylight, making sure that the wind can flow through, allow for vegetation in the buildings. I'll come back to that later. And then, of course, also being able to look through the buildings so that it's reduces the massiveness of things. So looking at proportions and scales in urban design and buildings in general, this is just an image. It's been done since hundreds and thousands of years. I mean, humans have looked at these things and thought about them. And it's something we just sometimes, I mean, we have to make sure we take care of that. So then back to the slide which I had last time is just the familiar streetscapes of the proportions of what we know in Pondicherry. So just looking at that and giving it some scale so that we can understand the different proportions of residential streets, mixed use, the shared mobility in the narrow street, which is a wide road, but it lacks shade, although it is used, but everybody's always trying to find that little piece of shade, which is usually used up by vendors. And the beauty of public spaces which are integrated into the urban fabric, which is something we really have to look into also here. And then the problem of if there is no shade, the spaces become very reduced in their capacity to be able to use them. So then they're only used in the evenings. And then looking at, again, Pondicherry planned and unplanned or semi-planned green infrastructure. Beautiful trees, but they're not given the space they need, which leads to all kinds of problems in infrastructure and in the buildings and in the roads. A slightly better option where they've started planning, but you can see that when these trees grow to this side, the situation will not be that much better. This is a slightly better situation. Then another problem is as we develop the city, something Islan mentioned also is the heat island effect. Something very important to keep in mind, because we have, well, I guess it comes back, the more buildings, the more heat gets absorbed in the buildings, which radiate out, and vegetation can help a lot in reducing that shading the surfaces of the buildings so that they don't heat up. And yeah, here again we have just the list of important things to consider with, again, the runoff and the difference between, of course, the two. Sorry. Then going a bit more specifically, getting more into this actual site situation. So allowing always for the wind to pass through the site so that the houses have natural ventilation as much as possible, which can very much avoid air conditioners, which again lead to more global warming. And the importance of having vegetation in and around buildings. So it's great for thermal comfort, air quality, It absorbs noise, so if you have trees and plants close to the building, you have the noise from your neighbors gets distorted and absorbed. And of course, the biophilia, which is humans are better off in green places. And just some simple consideration, what I already mentioned is the ensuring the shading of your facades on the south and in the north, because we are on the close to the equator. We're just 12 degrees north of the equator, so the sun actually goes to the north from May to August. So we also need to have overhangs on the northern side. I figured out that the northeast monsoon comes from the northeast, and no matter how big your overhang is, you're never going to be able to keep the water from coming onto your terrace. So there's no point trying, but at least you shade from the sun, make sure your facades don't get any sun during the day. And the south it's more easy because the sun is generally high in the summer in the south, and as in the winter when it's low, you actually want it to come in. So then it's nice to have a bit of sun on your terraces sometimes. And then again, the importance and just the whatever advantages of having trees, which reduce the general temperature of surrounding area. Then I wanted to go look into building materials, because last time I had mentioned that concrete is not the way forward for everything. Of course, we can't avoid it totally, but so there's so much available. I mean, we have our homegrown poured earth and rammed earth and the compressed earth blocks. The ancient techniques of lime plaster, of lime, building with lime in general, I've tried to explore that a bit. I asked Satprem, and he said, he confirmed that it doesn't work with steel, so we can't use it as concrete. But looking just on the internet, I found that nowadays we have fiberglass reinforcement bars, so it's actually an option. And there's also graphite, but I think that's a bit expensive. But we don't know what the future holds, so we'll see as we go along. But it's really just that I think it's really something, if we want to be all we claim that we want to be, we really have to take these things seriously of reducing our carbon footprints and going down that road of maybe sometimes having the more difficult building material to work with, more maintenance, but in the long run, it's actually better. And lime plaster and lime building works really well. I mean, it makes a significant difference in the temperature in the buildings and the general climate. So just looking at some of the homegrown things we have, wattle and daub, that's Fabian's house, by the way. We have poured earth, concrete, and jack arches used also in the Sante building. And then I discovered, I've used these woody blocks, which are also great because they're clay, very little material comparatively, and good insulation because they're hollow. And then I discovered that in India nowadays you get pre-tensioned concrete, precast slabs or whatever. Anyway, so that's again, if you have to use concrete, and it's a reduction of material, and it's fast installation. So it's something to look at also. And then looking, again, here's some homegrown examples of which just for the building material and the form, the deep windows, poured earth with cement flooring. It's a concrete frame structure, but it minimizes the concrete, and this roof is all hoodie blocks. This is an Orville. This is an Orville. This is also an Orville. This one, yes, and this is somewhere else. But I just wanted to show that also large buildings are actually being made with rammed earth and poured earth. So it's not like we only have 1 or 2 story buildings. We have to see how that goes further. I'm sure other people know much more about this, but Then I had this, the infiltration map, which is very old, and I looked for a percolation map, but couldn't find anything. And anyway, the two are very much sort of the same. But what this just shows is that the areas with a high percolation of infiltration also is where somehow the forests have developed mostly. And then again, this is a courtesy of, I think, Isla. Just a very nice schematic picture of the runoff we have in Orville. So the ridge, and then it goes to the east and the west, and a little bit to the north. And from here, the Ore Dam goes also to the northwest. So here is just to show where then that is in relation to the forests we have. And then I jumped to mobility, which I did in collaboration, or mostly just borrowed from Fabian and Hendrik and incorporated. So it's just showing where what is. Basically, this has all been discussed. But leads me to the next topic of infrastructure, saying where there's the parks and only pedestrians and cyclists, and for now, also less need in most cases of infrastructure. So I came up with this very schematic little plan for the infrastructure, and to have precast conduits in the places where we will in the near future need more infrastructure to come in. So all these places, the residential zone up to Solar Kitchen, and then this is the center field stretch where for now there's the high tension cable, and the OFC is probably in as well. So we don't actually need to do anything there, but to definitely plan for a conduit, because it will be the most dense residential area, so we will have to have conduits on both sides. And then this is the international zone area. This is not entirely correct. Anyway, so we have a conduit there with the possibility to have more conduit. And through Darkali, we just have a flexible pipe which goes in, and which all the cables and conduits can, cables and pipes can go through. I'll show you. And then the same goes for the Bliss and this stretch. Here we already have the high tension cable, but there's no buildings planned here, so nothing needs to be connected. So it can just go from junction box to junction box. And then from the junction boxes, again, it can pan out. So this is just showing it more in context. And yeah, so these are the precast conduits. It can be all very neatly laid in. And these are these humongous junction boxes. Of course, I've now learned that the infrastructure, it's too early to decide on what the infrastructure will be, but that will be decided by the experts when things are more clear. And these would be these flexible pipes which can go through the parks and the forests, and then just into the junction boxes, and from there they can either go into a conduit or be connected. So these are actually examples from the presentation we saw just before lunch from the experts from Ahmedabad. And this is Eric's proposal. He just made a very quick kind of proposal of what would be possible, homegrown, produced here. So I think that's actually a really good kind of option. And like I said before, it's a huge expense now, but everybody has confirmed that in the future and in the long run, it's going to save a lot of money, because it's going to eliminate this perpetual digging up and breaking of pipes and cables and all this kind of stuff, because you'll always be able to just lift up the lids or go into the junction box, connect new things, I'll fix things. So something really just some options of nice, neat things. And my little sketch of the conduits which could follow the contour of the ground and be used as cycle and pedestrian walkways. They could be above ground where it's necessary for the water to flow under, or in the ground the water can flow over, they can be sealed. And this is just a very simple sketch of the idea of having the conduit also always on the same radius on the outer side of the road, and then with having junction boxes. It goes under the road, and you have a junction box, and from there, again, you connect out. So these would be these junction boxes, and then here it would be a flexible conduit, and on that side, it would be a precast conduit. This is from last time. I haven't done anything further on this. This is the intersection of the international zone with the Darkali forest. So I wanted to open up the southern side of the Darkali forest for more activities, because it's such a beautiful place, and it would be nice to be able to share it with more people. So just to have a very simple sort of activities happening there. It doesn't have to be anything specific. It could just be yoga. It could be a little whatever get together with kids, art installations, and so it's just to make the Darkali Park accessible to more people, while still keeping the inner part of it as the very closed, not closed, but very sort of quiet sanctuary type of wild place for the wildlife. And this line of force has been discussed many times, and while I was looking at the lines of force, I realized that it's on the canyon. And then last time Neha and Ganesh presented this idea with the water. So that sort of fit in so beautifully, and I had this idea to just plant it really dense forest of TDEF, so that it has its own power and it has its own force, so it becomes like a force of nature, what Ganesh and Neha was saying. And we have this other line of force, which is half on the canyon. So consequently, I thought, okay, then half of it would be planted, and the other half would be very light sort of structures. 20? Okay. So then going to the other side, this is again, I haven't done any further work on it. It's just a place, it's the northern side of Darkali. It's between the industrial zone and the Darkali. So it's more a place for me for little markets, expose people to present their products, have little markets, lunch places, eateries. People can go there for coffee, lunch break, enjoy the forest in that area, and the water bodies. So then, by chance, I had a very brief kind of encounter with the lines of force, but I couldn't come up with anything which I thought did justice to whatever. But then I found these studies of Roger Auger, which actually very much tie into kind of the ideas I have of these open spaces, impermeable, not impermeable, but permeable, porous, and off the ground, so that the ground coverage is minimum. So these are a compression of the slides I had last time. It's about the industrial zone, which is also the soil typology is not so permeable. So it's good to have buildings which are raised off the ground, so that you allow for more ground to be for the water to percolate, rather than having too many closed spaces. And then again, bringing lots of nature in. And keeping buildings very open and cross ventilation, wind, shade, nature. Going into the street width, so looking into that further, because there was an interesting comment I got. It was that the road actually just needs to be as wide as an emergency vehicle. So 3 meters, this is supposed to be 3 meters, is sufficient. And it turns out that it's also the most comfortable and the most safe if you give priority to cyclists and you keep this cars as guests on the road. And so I just did a little study of some sections. These are the sections I had before already. The plaza, where the crown crosses the forest, all is needed is actually the infrastructure, which And where it crosses the park, you can have a cycle path and a pedestrian, and you keep the infrastructure in the same position. And then you have the different sections throughout the crown, which would be from very narrow, and then just the different experiences, but always making sure that there's sufficient shade. And just for, I think what makes sense is to keep the infrastructure always in the exact same position, but everything else can meander around that. In this case, I haven't gone to the other side, but it just speaks for itself, I think. And then I wanted to go into much more detail, but I got as far as looking at this corner of the humanscapes and Kalpana. They're fuzzy because it was foggy in the early morning. And how to really, with very simple methods, actually create little spaces and public spaces which are at least semi-shaded. So I came across all these fantastic bamboo structures. So I thought, okay, that's something which can happen actually at relatively short notice. And it's also just creating spaces which have no need for any kind of monetary transaction. You can even come there, you just meet up there with friends and sit and relax and, back. So this again, just a compression of what I had last time, the different aspects of what could all happen on this stretch of crown, which I wanted to look at in more detail. Different areas. Don't think I need to go into that much more. Again, just informal seating areas, some areas where people can exercise in the park maybe. And then moving on from the solar kitchen, having that stretch in center field between the center guest house and solar kitchen could become like a pedestrian cyclist thing with lots of green. And then I wanted to look at the solar kitchen again, so I went into a little bit more detail. And the idea was, this is the edge of the line of force. So I just looked at like what would the movements be. This is the solar kitchen PTTC. Where do people come from? Where do they go? And then create shade with trees and temporary shading structures until the trees are big along the edges, where we could have eateries and whatever, and then the center keep an open space, which could be like a sort of a step well for activities. And that's it. Oh no, yeah, so just some impressions. Looking into the future, I found this image and I really liked it, but then I got into a problem at home because they said, oh, but we need solar panels on all the roofs. So we'll have to figure that one out. But I just thought if we could do something like that, I think that would be quite nice. And yeah, I just wanted to emphasize is to maximize the minimum and plan to allow for the future to be planned and build only for now. We don't know what wonders the future holds. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dorla. Yeah. So the tea is not here yet. So I suggest, if it's okay with everyone, that we do the Q&A now and have the tea after. Would that be okay with everyone? Okay. So then I invite all the 4 architect teams to come up. Yeah. And Fabian and Henrik and Dorle.
Just to say, like in the morning, we'll do 3 questions, and then the architects will get a chance to answer.
So I think one common thing which I saw with everybody's presentation is that outer ring road actually meanders too much into the city area. Especially in the residential zone 1, it cuts across and it nearly goes to the crown. right, nearly next to it. And the other part is in the residential zone 4 and 5, there's a huge ingress into it. Like, you take a deviation to bypass that Idayan Chavadi. So I'm quite curious because, the general belief everywhere is like as we move more and more towards the center of Auroville, we move into a pedestrian form of we go to Mathuramandir area, it's purely pedestrian. And the more and more we go outside Auroville, the city area, then we slowly see how we could have that too also a very disciplined way of traffic, even heavy traffic. Now, when we have this outer ring road actually getting too close to the inner side, are we creating too much of disturbances? That's point number one. Point number two is, if you see, by proposing these alternative routes, which also cuts through, if you see in the galaxy, through the proposed parks and other things, are we also not breaking the parks and everything into different fragments? These are my two questions, but I just want to know, or maybe did I misunderstand? This is my first set of two.
Thank you, Shivata. Are there any more questions?
I have two questions. I think one is, we talk about the different mobility process, the pedestrian or the motor vehicle. But I think Fabian pointed out this 1 million visitors who are going to come in. So are we also thinking about to what sectors the visitors will be allowed? So we are talking about three types of people, the residents, the bioregion people, and the visitors. So is there any structure whether the visitors will come through the from the international zone, or will they be accessing the entire crown? That was not really very clear to me. That is the first thing. And the second thing, I think we heard a lot of food thing and youth plaza, a lot of industrial zones. But one sector that I represent, health, was missing. So I think the health part, I think Induja pointed out that point. So why I'm saying health is, I think that is where we talked about this ambulance access into the entire crown, where, because right now we don't have the residential only in the residential zone. So we have scattered population. So that should be also considered. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
My question to Dora is whether when she says 3 meters, I suppose you mean a single lane, one-way traffic. Because if you have two-way, you will need more than 3 meters. What I have as an observation, and that same observation I also made when I met all the individual tables in the previous session, that if we can realize a truly sustainable mobility, and it was clarified in the morning that we mean by motorized traffic, we mean polluting traffic and noisy traffic. If we can make non-polluting, non-fossil fuel and non-noisy traffic, e-buses, e-trams, whatever, then why do we want to bypass that? Why do we want only cycles on the crown and the so-called motorized traffic bypassing the crown? I think we are not good enough then. We should be able to develop a mobility system that allows e-mobility on the crown itself and not push the motorized, so-called motorized traffic towards Kotakarai or the Kali Temple or Bharatipuram. That's not correct. We should, on the crown, demonstrate, in my view, that we can have vehicular traffic which is totally sustainable. And it can be done.
You have a question, Tuan?
The question was about the 3 meter, whether there was 1 lane or 2 lanes.
So now maybe before the next set of questions, the architects can answer.
We can both answer on that. So again, I understand your point that bypass of the outer ring it's just one solution, or it's one thought way. How far inside you come, when in the proposal that I did, it was really coming more from Kriya to the south of Anitya and then linking with it. So I think it's a good question, no? And the other one, the residential zone, I wouldn't have seen that stretch which then connects from the outer ring south of Sukhavati to the crown as an outer ring. It's predominantly just serving that part of the residential zone. It's not really a throughway. I think all the traffic which goes through is more on the more densely developed outer side. That for that part, I didn't understand your question about the parks and all. That
like when it cuts through sector 1 and 2 and also in sector 4 and 5, what it does is basically it fragments the line of forces in sector 4 and 5, and also it fragments the park, no, which is over there. We are actually fragmenting the park into 2 clear divisions, where actually it could have one contiguous park, which will make it more beautiful and more wonderful. So we are only creating more problems by making that road through it, right?
At least in my proposal, one thing where it clearly deviated from the 2007 Anupama plan was to actually allow for the green corridors. And I think if you have a road without buildings on both sides, then you actually have a green corridor. So what is now in the proposal is really cutting all the green corridors. So. And then it's always the question, okay, what is the alternative? Like, how much do you cut through forests if you don't do it here? So I think we try to come to a good compromise. So I understand the question, but what is the alternative? So,
yeah, I just wanted to say something about Tuan's point about the sustainable road making and all. We are not yet there, so for me it's really the question, why do I not experiment with the most sustainable transport modes on the existing parts of the road system that we have, instead of opening up sensitive areas without really knowing what will come. So I think that's just, in general, I would very much agree that one should not offload outside closer to the village areas, denser populated areas. But first experiment, know what you do, and then you take the action.
Maybe one, I just wanted to give one quick comment on the last, on Tuan's statement, that okay, we are getting more heavy traffic now on the crown, but at the same time, I think it's how we thought of the crown is like that you have it really diverse. So you have the clearly pedestrian zone where you not even have electric traffic, and then in other parts you allow for it where it doesn't matter so much. So we really try to think of the crown as yeah, a very diverse ring. So in some parts it can be heavy traffic, in other parts you just have a cycle path or a pedestrian zone. And I think this is much more interesting than to think of the crown only as, okay, this is this traffic road for electric traffic.
I think
just wanted to add to what was said about the sustainable mobility, because we pretty much have a nice chance on the residential zone stretch to actually experiment a sustainable mobility. So all the mobility, if that is considered as a priority and mobility experts come together and we experiment that and we say, okay, it's working, then I think that's why we are phasing it out. We are not talking about this movement forever. That's why we are clearly phasing it out 5 to 7 years, 10 years. And once we reach at a good solution, which we experiment, and then it can be changing. So that's why whole planning is an iterative process. Nothing is fixed.
Okay, should we get another set of questions? I think Lily had a question, right? And then Manu as well.
Thank you. Well, you've kind of answered some of my question. I want to just express an appreciation for the mobility concept and of incorporating kind of considering the parts of land which don't yet belong to Oroville, and also roads that we are using at the moment, and how those can be incorporated into a future planning system. So I appreciate that. But my other question was regarding the kind of relating to what you said, the health question, but more like, how do we separate from, how do the public spaces and the private spaces, how are they divided? And then last time I got very carried away thinking about the cows, because, bear with me, I think that that could be a really good way to incorporate the bioregion, in the sense that we could share our resource of creating forests and green areas, and how can we incorporate kind of our neighbors and say that we invite the cows in rather than always having this battle of chasing them away from our, so we could have corridors for cows. This is an idea I had, but I was also thinking because if the crown is a really open space, then how do we separate that, and how do we overcome this issue in Oroville and a lot of our communities of fencing everything off? And I think the main reason for that is often to keep the grazers out, which obviously are sent into this area because we've done this amazing reforestation work. But how can we find a communication with our bioregion which includes that, so which welcomes we do consume milk and products that are produced by these animals, so how can we incorporate the bioregion and also our own farms? And that leads me on to another question, as a horse rider and in context of mobility. Like, I think, back in the day people used to ride their horses to school, for example. Could that be a part of our mobility as well, that children have that opportunity, that we have spaces to keep our horses, grazing areas for cows, and to create a space where that's incorporated in the consideration, and that's an outreach as well, because these animals used to be used as work animals. So if we can create animal welfare and reincorporate them into our functioning society as a tool, or not a tool, but as a help for our mobility and sustainability, creating manure and compost while moving us around and learning respect with our fellow animals as human animals. Yeah, done.
Thank you. Thank you very much for actually the 2 meetings that you had before, to actually eliminate all the overlaps and make everything very, very easy to comprehend. And thank you for that. My question to you is regarding Christo's observation about what unites the community regarding mobility. He said that at one point there was common agreement among the forest people and the city people that trams are the way ahead. And there was some concerted effort made to even lay a tram line. And in the research for this presentation, I found that in the Calcutta tram system, there are whole tram lines through completely wooded areas, totally percolating. There's no road surface, just the rail and grass and trees, and that's still operating. So why is it that we are a bit cold on this? Have you done any, did you come across any material that we don't want the solar tram, for instance? That's a great possibility for Oroville. And that could be on the crown. So why is it that not seriously thought about?
And we have another question from Judith as well.
Yeah, I had. There were 2 things actually that, because it's so interesting, this whole mobility thing. It's interesting because it's dynamic and our situation is continuously changing. Once upon a time we more or less were only on bicycles, and not even electric bicycles or on foot. And bit by bit the whole thing has evolved more and more towards a polluting, noisy, dusty form of transportation. And when we think about, and was mentioned, this kind of planning in a gradual way to come to something better, I feel it's like, yeah, we plan, but what I see is that the action is exactly opposite the planning. every day the number of cars owned by Aurovilians going down the Crown in front of, in front of the library is just going up, and everybody has a good excuse, So if we want some real planning about this, it's more like some real strong action, like cars don't go down here. But that leads me to my second observation, that if we want to build the city, my observation is that cities building, or even building anything right now, seems to involve an enormous number of JCBs, bobcats, excavators, heavy trucks, cement, big machines full of cement, all of which I know we're thinking of some sort of alternative way of building, but actually we're not really right there right now. And every time there's a construction site going up anywhere, even the most apparently ecological, environmentally friendly one, we still have all these kind of vehicles on the roads. So when we want to, even that nice bit of crown that was built in front of Kalpana, the library and everything, it kind of gets beaten up when these vehicles go over the top of it. It's like, exactly how do we hope to plan our mobility in the transitory phase from the Auroville we dream to live in to the Auroville that as we actually build it? That is my question.
Okay. Any architect response?
To Lily first. I think yes to almost everything that you said. Horses, yes, all those other experiences that you talked about. But we are kind of restricting ourselves to only crown right now. So we had to restrict in our imaginations also at times that, oh, that's going way too wide, or come back to ground, So I'm not sure about cow corridors though, because we already have them. We have spaces in Auroville where they are always around. So I think we have that relation already. But otherwise, I agree to almost all of it that you said. Coming to Manu's question, for us, we did not go to tram or even solar tram, mainly because we thought it's a very small population to try something that big. And that's why we thought we could start with electric shuttles, smaller vehicles, come up with a route and run it every few, maybe every hour. So once we start with some kind of a exploration, we will know how that is in use, and then go towards tram maybe one day. But straight away jump on the crown would be, I think, right now doesn't sound very feasible. So yeah, that's why we didn't explore that part much. Anybody wants to answer to Judith? You want to?
So the idea that I found most interesting in regards, okay, what kind of public transport system could you have, is actually electric buses with overlines, where you get away from the battery technology, but you don't get all the issues with pavement change, and you don't have, you can have these shared spaces, open spaces, pedestrian and all that, and you can still have an electric bus without batteries. So that was interesting to me.
Madam, hi, Judith, I don't know how to address it. Of course, mobility is a huge topic. I think none of us really pretends to have like silver bullets and all. It's a long process to talk about. When you talk about construction traffic, I think the existing road systems that we have suggested, they would be able to support that. Construction traffic, I remember when I was living in Bangalore, is limited to certain times of the day. You have efficient control systems, so all of that has to be in place. But it's a complicated topic, and it demands a lot of thinking and collaboration. And until the city is finally there where we want it to be, compromise and I don't know how better to answer that right now.
One thing that I think could immediately or pretty short term implemented in Oroville is actually have a car sharing. So that, because how often do you need a car, and then where do you get it from? So to alleviate the pressure for a lot of people to get a car because they need to get somewhere, car sharing would be a very good start.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Oh.
Hello, everyone. It's one comment and one question. The comment is, especially this group, they really took a challenge, which is, if you look at the previous groups, mostly focusing on geometrical exploration and phenomenology and solving many conceptual issues. But this group is really, and this is, I am talking about this because the brief, part of the brief was, this is the master plan, how to have the master plan moving towards the refined sensibility of the vision, which is I have seen in previous presentation, but also how the vision can be grounded in reality, which is the bioclimatic, the water systems, the flora, the fauna, the mobility, complexity, the systems. And I see this group has made this beginning of a trial, and this is, you have taken, I think, one of the most complex challenges, so thank you for this. The question is the issue of phasing, because I think it's very interesting, and I think I gave that comment to Fabian last time. I think it is inevitable that at some point when you are moving towards from one situation to another, is that there is a transition. And it is inevitable that these streets that exist today, you cannot simply cancel them. And if you cancel them, automatically the cars and the whatever current motorized and non-sustainable mobility would move into the crown, basically. So I think they help each other. I can see, for example, some of these existing roads which help that whenever parts of the crown are established, are closed for an experiment. An experiment, what can we experiment in this part? Because anyway, mobility is moving in the other part. So my question actually to you, and here I want to poke a little bit the Vastu Shilpa because they have maybe the experiences to also give some support here. When we speak about phasing, do you think at this stage you can say this is phase 1, but I can imagine phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 until we get to the optimal we want? Or you can only imagine phase number 1 and see, for example, how people would select the natural behavior of the human being, which streets they would move more, which streets they would use less, and then that opened the door for the second phase, and then the second phase opened the door. Can you have this clarity of phasing towards a final aim, or it's inevitable that you have to take a step and then check the second because mobility is also changing. So I hope that was not too complex. To both, yeah. Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Just checking if there's any other questions.
Is there tea?
Is there tea? Not yet. Okay.
Yeah. So I would think it's a mix of two, but when on that one slide where I lined out possible steps, I think you can really start today, like making that decision of starting with this transport switch in the start and service node, like developing these systems, paving that road, improving on the existing stretch of both the Crown Residential 1-2 industrial zone, using the opportunity of that. And this is two systems which, as you said, they exist parallel for a certain time until one disappears gradually and the other one develops stronger. So work really on, I think that's really a beautiful challenge that sector 3, 4, 5 Crown. So I think, so it's a mix of both. So you will always see before you start phase 2, you will draw your conclusions from phase 1, the reaction of the population and the systems to it, and then you adjust phase 2.
Yeah, I think phasing is a tricky question because Firstly, you have a living system. You have an environment that people are living in. There are a whole lot of other environmental and ecological issues that exist. So phasing has to be fairly flexible, because when you are doing one part, the other part is also affected at the same time. That's one. The second thing is that phasing shouldn't be looked at as that you made a master plan, now you say, if this was a greenfields project where nothing was done, you could make these very precise phasing orders. But in a situation like this, your phasing would keep changing. And it would keep changing for several reasons. Your priorities would change. As you see certain things coming together, your priorities would change. So I think the idea of a plan here is that it is naturally flexible to adapt to changing situations as you sort of move towards it. So I would think that this would have to be sort of worked out from step to step, stage to stage, especially with mobility, because accessibility is the fundamental to sort of survive in this environment. So I would say that it's going to be, what exists will continue for a while. And as the new things come in and things move off that, and you can service all those areas with the new things, until unless they're put in place, you will not be able to get rid of what was already there. So, and my overall experience is that what starts never ends. So I would say the extent of that, supposing there are paths, those paths may become a little more, let's say, defined as time goes by, but they will remain. And I think we'll have to sort of work through that.
Yeah, there's one more question. Just to say again, to really keep it to questions, and there's always time in the tea break and tomorrow to exchange ideas.
No, mine is not a question. In fact, I could say, my question is, we did, when we had this series of presentations early Jan, the question of mobility, land use, and infrastructure, how they're interrelated, was explained, right? So that between the present land use, proposed land use, and how you actually work through in a way that your mobility is not just your road and your vehicle on the road. It is the entire concept of what do you do where, and how do you bring things together so that it's an efficient use of investment. And then based on that, frequency and density and FAR and FSI and other things, you look at the most flexible, efficient, and environmentally suitable form of either the system on which your vehicle moves or the type of vehicle and what moves in those vehicles. And I see that in almost all proposals, we are looking at the built environment, the natural environment, which is very good, we need to do that, both given the present scenario of present land use and other things, and the future with the master plan and the galaxy concept. But one of the major things that is missed out is the socio-economic aspect, because almost everybody, when they describe the functions of how they interpret the built and the open spaces, are only talking mostly about leisure activities, you know, or activities of a developed society that has resources well managed and can then sit back and enjoy it. We are going to be constantly in a state of flux and transition. Leisure activity would be something that is a compensatory aspect at the cost of development. So our mobility concept has to be tied to the land use, not just the zonal land use, but actually on a micro level, where within the existing land use, create nodes of intensification that ties in the present system to proposed system in a way that you can slowly transition towards something that is efficient, that automatically people choose, because that is how it flows, you see? Supervising, regulating, controlling, punishing is not sustainable. People should automatically move towards a certain way of living, moving, and behaving. And that's what planning is about. Sorry.
So, does anyone want to respond?
Yeah.
Statement more than a question. It's a statement more than a question.
There's not really an answer.
I mean, just as a defense, like, so I think what Fabian and I did mostly is to open up the conversation and to have a proposal which is kind of taking things differently than what's already there. And we are both not professionals in this regard, so yeah, I hope Vastushilpa does all what you say.
Thank you, architects. Tea is here, so it's a good time to break. We'll come back in 20 minutes, and we'll ring a bell closer to the time.
All right, gentlemen, we'd like to start. We are going to start our last presentations for today, so we've almost made it. Thank you to everyone who is still here. And then we will have a wrap-up and close. After 2 presentations, Q&A, and then we have the wrap-up and close. So with that, I'll hand over to Raj.
You guys have to bear with me for the last time. I have slides which you have seen 3, 4, 5, 6 times, but this is the last one. So bear with me. I'll keep as much as interesting, because I know it's the end of the day. I approached this exercise because I'm not a planner, or I have no experience except in university. I approached through building a narrative, a robust narrative for this planning process. And the rest, I'm hoping, Vastushilpa will take care. So the narrative, it is the lived experience being here, and I looked at some of the crucial elements through case studies around the world. They are like water, food, community. So I looked at some of the examples. So I spent a lot of time building this a story. So, and it's not to have a solution or solving any of the issues, but in this process, what I was thinking was it would generate inspiring dialogues, talks among ourselves, among the community, and that's pretty much it. So with that, so the first part I'll go a bit quick. I have to say I haven't done much for today. I haven't had much of time. I had some other issues, so it'll be less than 20 minutes, I guarantee. So road, it's more than a road, and this is a celebration. I'll come back to that. Auroville, looking inward. Now, the next 50 years, going out and looking out and building more bridges. This is Mother's word. I've read it. I'm sure you guys have seen it, so I will. So, 3 elements, 3 points. Looking at water, food, community, social capital as the core of planning. So, my story starts with the water here. Oops, sorry. This is one of the water treating exercise. So there are several ways, but this is one of it which I looked at it. This is very key for this entire proposition which I am putting forward. So using existing water treatment and how we can adopt this to reclaim the water we consume every day. The crown as a dynamic water and your used water, reclaimed water, decentralized, you putting into crown and then utilizing that to other things, growing food, recreation, and so forth. This is again. Then water being brought in from the bioregion. This is really crucial. So bioregion becomes part of your everyday, becomes a stakeholder in this. Then using that water to grow food around Oroville and bioregion, and then connecting to existing areas. So that would take some of the excess water and also connecting with existing so that we can use the storm water and so forth. Again, going beyond and see how that could actually multiply or beginning to expand into clusters within the city. This is a built environment, very graphically, how food production and living and this water surrounding could be part of that. There's a few scenarios. And I looked at youth center as the starting point within Crown and Nature Interpretation Center, where what that means is looking at nature through learning through different ways, and night and day, using the elements as our subject, looking more detail. So, oops, this is where it is on the crown, one of the radials, oops, sorry, and that's through the existing forest and going under, and installation, water, and there's water on the crown, and while you touching the subterranean, a few cross sections, observing rain and some of the spaces inside. Music instrument, using water, wind as a learning, through learning. So the next one is experiencing food. So I looked at some of the trend, what's happening. So there's a little bit of a clue to how we can use this food as a also connected to mobility. So this is people come to Oroville to experience food from Chennai, from Bangalore. Sole purpose is to get a hire car, drive to Oroville, and experience amazing food here. It is true. We have all kind of food here. Why not? So the top it is on Oroville Road, which is quite busy. Some of these Oroville units relocating to where there's a fertile land where food is grown, and relocating to the outside of, this is outside of the master plan, but it's Oroville land. So you have fields and you have restaurants on stilts. So the idea is food is not just food, the wholesome experience of it, visual and eating, so that it might change the way we behave with food. And some of these examples, the restaurant all along the growing food, again this water, food. So this is today's. One of the experience I took away from interacting with the peers and the community members was, okay, all these are great. How do we see that in Crown? These ideas, these visions. So I looked at on existing condition how this could be implemented or to worked out. So I'm talking about food, water, and community, which is like, when I say community, it's young, older, and bioregion beyond. So just not Oroville. So this is a Sante, Surrender, that stretch. There's 2-3 communities live there. There's a paved road, there's trees are built on the side, there's a stormwater, and there's this existing buildings. So then I tried to see if I could utilize, if I could test this. So, oops, sorry. So when I looked at it, immediately I could see the potential roof spaces here with these communities. That could be turned into a food growing, also your own food, or people coming from outside. So I lived in Saranda. Right next to us, there was a man coming from, I think, Edanchavadi or one of this bioregion, would come every day, do farm, because his own land, and then he would go back home. So he's growing things. So I thought, that could probably work in a larger scale. People coming to Auroville, like they're already doing, to grow and to cultivate. Farming is very known industry around here. So, and rooftop, and also the ground. On the ground, temporarily, you can extend. It could be kept for future use, the land around. That could be used for growing. I mean, farming is no infrastructure heavily built on it. So 5 years later, you have other plants, you can move on. So combine that, you have space on the roof, you have space on the ground, and you have water combining that. So now we have community. This is probably one of the areas. So again, looking a little bit more into much more detail, I've taken a small stretch of land, that's Sante and Saranda, that little bit of a stretch. So this is the existing road. It's about 4.5 meter of paved road as a carriage, and then you have about 2.5 meters of each side for trees, and then one side you have a bicycle path, and there is a bit of a reserve, and then the Sante building. So on this side there's a little bit more reserve, there's a stormwater drain there. So I've taken that as an existing. So this is actually using this idea of water cultivation. So the road is shared. This is very important. The shared is actually squeezed, but we have bicycle path integrated into the existing and then widened up. So I'll come back to a section. This is actually this is Saranda entry, this is Sante. Then you have what is stormwater used to be. Now we have a reclaimed water present there. Then you have stairs to that, then seating arrangement, and these are pockets of food like raised beds, which you can actually grow. A community can actually have a veggie patch or growing vegetables. I know it's on a shade, but we can look into how it can be grown. And inside that dedicated lane for bicycles and other walking, running. So you have a dedicated lane, and then you have a small stream of water. Then you have this carriageway which is being squeezed in, but the speed is 20 kilometers per hour. So that's really crucial. Sorry, I'll just go back. This is actually in Copenhagen. It's within the city. Jan Gale actually looked at it. They carved this out of it. It used to be a storm water drain and beautifully converted into a child playing sort of playground here. People are sitting here, there's water, and the bicycle path. I think there are different parts in the world has been done where it's just a stormwater is reclaimed and turned into a beautiful space. In Seoul in South Korea also they have done this, but this is one example. So looking at the view towards Sante, that elevation of that section, so we have raised bed, so kids are part of this streetscape. I looked at adventure playground, which is one of the question was asked during the community gathering last session, was like one gentleman asked, is there a play in this? And it really struck me, because we're always looking at the adults, and we architects get stuck into it. But why not? If you look at Copenhagen, it is 50, 60 years ago, they began integrating child playground and also decreasing the motor vehicle traffic. It's one of the first city, I'm talking about 60 years ago, they began to eradicate motor vehicle then. Now they've really successfully done so, many areas. They've also included this play, adventure play mostly. So, and I'm seeing that as a crown is part of that. It's a playground growing, and communities are like a live street. Sorry. So another section towards looking at the, this is looking at the Saranda. There's a roof as being the food producing, and there's some seating, and also growing raised beds. This is actually the water, which you have steps getting into it. There are some examples I've looked around. Some of the cross-section, how it could play. So we're looking at 20 kilometers. Some of the width, I looked at some of the vehicle. This is being in the ambulance and tractor. So the carriageway, the total way is 5.5 meters, but there are pockets. If there is an emergency vehicle, there are pockets actually existing vehicle can come in. So I live in Udumbu, and coming to Auroville, this is a very narrow road. So every time I go, and I have trucks, and somehow, I've seen this rest of India, somehow you get stuck in between, there's no place. The driver puts his head out, and he goes, that's it. Means, thoda adjust karo. Just adjust a little bit. So I go back, and this aji-baji goes on, and there's not even a single word, and we move on. I think this is a really amazing quality. I think we should use that. Rather than saying dedicated lane for this. We're good at adjusting, Indians are great at it. So I squeezed the road a little bit smaller so that we can do that. So how? I just go back to the previous, oops, sorry. Oh. So this is the carriageway. This is a little pocket of area where you can actually come in if there is an emergency vehicle. So we can actually move into that. So it gives you at least 3.5, 4 meters of width for fire engine or VIPs or whoever wants to go through. So there's a clear way that. But again, it's on not a regular, but there's an option to that. So, oops, sorry. Okay, this is one of the visual view of that street. So there is. We are, as an architect, we look at planning and designing through very solving problems, or meeting the client's requirement. Sometimes we forget that there is a life in that. So I'm trying to see, it's not, there is no book for bringing life into street, but it's mostly organic, mostly bringing communities together, different age groups together, somehow combining that. So what I'm trying to do here is give that opportunity to create or to happen, to organically, it should somehow evolve. If you look at some of the villages, villages of India, it's thriving, it's beautiful. For a kid to grow, you have so many dads and moms in that. So when we design these streets, I've been to some of these cities. Somehow, they look fantastic on the plan. They look fantastic on a helicopter, look down. But on the ground, it's barren land. And I get goosebumps when I'm talking about this. I've seen from Myanmar capital to Canberra to Chandigarh and a few places. Somehow, we are missing in that life. Being in India, we love this village and street life, but when we are designing, somehow, I don't know, it's my personal experience. So what I'm trying to do here as a crown, to integrate different age group, integrate different aspect of community together. I lived in Australia for some time. If I see a family together, that's a big thing. A dad, grandma, and children all together. Wow, they must be going for taking photo or something, you know. It's not common. But in India, if they say, if you go into someone's house alone, the first thing they'll ask, where are the kids? Where's your mom? Where's your grandma? You know. So there's a beautiful quality here. I think we need to integrate that into our streetscape and designing as architect collectively. So there are some sketches I drew very quickly to see how some scenarios on Crown, this water being there, and buildings are elevated from the ground where the bottom bit is mostly for public and to thoroughfare, you know. It also suits for this climate perfectly. I live in a house on the first floor. Mosquitoes are very less of scorpions, less of blah, 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 blahs. I think it's tropical environment. I've looked at it in Southeast Asia also. So the older houses are all above ground, one floor. So the bottom bit is used for the daytime, where there's heavy sun. You go under the house, it's much cooler. There's wind cross, you know, permeable walls. So I see that on the Crown as being lifted up and using wood and reclaimed and laminated. There are plenty of ways we can use old, cheap, small, throwaway wood back to it. So, and water being the part of it, a reclaimed water. One of the plazas being like this water built environment and gathering spaces. So this is a picture of like bioregion receiving Oro credits, Oro bits, Auroville spirit in some sort, maybe exchange, where bringing the communities together as a stakeholder. That could be a reality very soon, might look very. So Auroville lies in a very rich Tamil Nadu and beyond. I think when we're looking at Crown and Auroville future, this is a rich tapestry we need to weave together. I think there's a lot of I wouldn't say benefit, but it's the way to go. I live in a community where I segregate everything. I go to work in Kualapalam, right in the master plan. I am battling plastic burn every day. I am chasing community panchayat work every day. So, and during this conversation, I realized one point I could take away. I didn't win, but by the way, it's still going on. And I felt like we need to have more bridges to build the community together, not just Auroville, beyond. I think this is really, really important. So that tapestry, this Crown allows us to bring people together. It's a sort of there is a center and this Crown and this beyond. So it's an opportunity, I see. So in this journey, there are some key people who really inspired me in this vision. C.J. Lim, he talks about, he's an architect, talks about food growing in urban setting, an existing setting. Jan Gehl is Danish architect, talks about streetscape and children and being live. Christopher Alexander talks about life on the street. Buckminster Fuller, again Carl Theodor Soronen, also is a landscape architect. He designed a playground and kids didn't use it. Then he spent time looking at it. Then he designs the next one completely the opposite. The first one very manicured, very beautiful thing. The next one he designs was completely what they call adventure playground. Kids were loving this. So I think that was a big experience for me also to how that could be integrated into, and local experience living in Auroville, and also feedback from peers, and then so community members. This has been a great journey. Again, I am asking 3 points: food, water, and community into the core of planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. And we have our next presenters, Shailaja and Jitesh. First Shailaja and then Jitesh. And it's our final presentation session of the day, so we almost made it.
How does this work? Can you remind me? No. I got it. I touched it and I got it. In the meantime, I would like to acknowledge my team, Arya and Jay, very supportive, and our special Harita architect on probation. You tell me if I forget something. And of course, we have the privilege of having an in-house planner in the office. Lalit never tires of our ideas being bombarded and trying to make them cohesive and readable. And so thanks to everybody and all of you. So yes, Jitesh is going to come. I'm so grateful that I'm letting him speak today over here. So we start from the galaxy, and what we have taken from galaxy is we have interpreted it as a playfield of connectivity. Connectivity of built spaces, of landscape, of water features, of movement, and this is what we have worked out with the tool, which is playfulness, because we thought that was the way if we get into it, because we didn't feel otherwise capable of deciphering it, and we thought if we are playful and if we really allow ourselves to experiment and go into it, we might come out with some jewels. And I'll begin with the sections that we showed last time. They are of the given road. And what we are trying is one of the pearls that had come up in Ganesh's presentation, that if you're not seeing the road, it's because it's under the buildings. And that means that we need to connect from time to time, if not at all the places. And so we were thinking of connectivity across the road in the sections and to tweak a bit the section so that that was possible. And I'll just cross by. We have spoken about it last time and how we feel that the site should start from the crown, not beyond the crown on two sides of the roads. The moment we stop saying two sides of the roads, then we have a possibility of thinking of it being as one cohesive whole. And possibilities of interconnections. And then a question came in our session last Saturday, the Saturday before, is in fact, Mari said to me, that I would not like to go above there because there's so much of vibration from the road and the vehicles. And suddenly I realized that that is not the kind of the road I'm envisioning here. I'm not envisioning fast-going traffic here causing vibration and the fact that we would not like to go over it. In fact, I was proposing that the library extension happens across the crown. And, okay, so it triggered us to think of really, is that what we are planning of, traffic going on this in whatever way given to us? And now on that, should we even connect? And the question comes, what type of street do we need? Because I've taken this from Henrik. This is Henrik's slide. And he has, 16.7 meter road and built elements around it. And as Mari pointed out today, and as we as a team felt, actually, it will be like this because nobody really wants to be right next to a road where vehicles are moving, even if you have 2.1 meters and 3 meters. No, we don't want to be around it. We want to be as away from it as possible. And then what we will see of our galaxy plan is a clear cut through it. And is that really what we are thinking of implementing? Because really all, even Ganesh mentioned that when we pick it up, it's one whole when you pick it up. And no, right now already I see as two different parts, and the more we go on this line, we'll have more parts. And I'm trying to work, our team is trying to work on the other direction as to how to connect it, so that yes, at parts it's open because we are talking of porosity, and other parts not open. But to have that, what are the examples we find where we have connections on top of the street? So we went back actually. We went back, thinking what kind of road do we need? And we said we said that we don't need a road. What we need is a street, an interactive space, which is there for mobility, yes, but where the movement is not only happening of vehicles and people, but of built elements here and there, and people do want to connect and want to go through because, Galaxy plan is all about communication and integration, and it should be seen in all the elements and at different scales. And then when we talk of the edge of the street, no, we don't want to put our buildings far away to avoid the road. In fact, we want to have parts of the built spaces, which are like semi-covered spaces, to speak to the road so that there is an extension of the street onto the spaces beyond. And then we looked at some modern examples, and we saw that wherever there are connections, we see what is the kind of climate on the street. It's not fast-moving traffic, it's not buzzing by, only then we feel like connecting through. So if we really think of connecting, we need to think of what we are proposing as a street. And some more examples, and I like that graphic because it really brings down to the scale of what we may have, and then we feel like connecting it over. It is related. And then from that starting point, we start again our presentation, and we say that Crown for us is a place where we see our culture unfolding. And as every city and every place has a culture, we believe that Auroville has a culture of values. We are given certain values which we have either imbibed or are trying to imbibe. And our street, like the downtown Auroville, will not have commercial like the cities have, because there is a commercial is what their value is. Our values are different. And those values will be out here to see and experience and live on this street. And they will be in form of art. See, we need outdoor spaces for these, it's inside. And they'll be in form of water and soil conservation, because that is also part of our value system. And the different building materials that we have been exploring ever since, Roger and Popo and Piero and Helmut started building. And with that kind of a background, I come back to the proposal that we have further worked on. So these are the existing buildings in the residential zone, from Solar Kitchen up to Sante and a little beyond up to the park. And what we have here now is a slightly different version. So what we had tried before was to take the footprint of the Galaxy, and now what we have done is we have interpreted that into different scaled spaces interconnected. So along with the existing, we have kept the proposed spaces. We have talked of connections on the top and also on the ground, connections also on the ground where the street widens and narrows from time to time. It widens to accommodate activities, sitting areas, impromptu chai, dosa stalls, pan galas. So yeah, so it widens to accommodate those. It also widens to accommodate, I don't know how to show it here, to accommodate, bazaars, farmers market, weavers, name it. And Manu has talked about different possibilities of having bazaars. So we have different bazaars here. So the space around the street is kind of punctuated, making it wider at places, making it narrower at places by activities which will be used by us. At the same time, as mentioned twice already, if an ambulance indeed has to go by, the other vehicles are able to be on the side, and the ambulance can indeed go by. And what we have here, we have taken the inputs from the residents last time, and we were told that I'd said that when we connect built spaces to each other, let us also have a common function. And I was told that why not have a parking for solar kitchen, because people come, they park, and it's required, and it's so ugly. So can you have, so this is of course not a design, but a kind of a urban design where we say that we can have connective space. And I was also told by one of the youth that yes, we want to be there, out there, but not all the time out in the open. So we want some space away too. So then we reworked on the form and the feature of the youth space, where it is partially on the road and partially away, and they have their own inner space. Complementing that is another space, more public in nature, and then the road that takes you to the parking. And as Mari has previously said, then most of the parking can happen here, along with other activities that can be thought about. I leave that to everybody to dream about. And yeah, in this way we went ahead, and maybe I go to the next slide. This is more in detail here. And then, because I was talking about connectivity of built forms, of pathways, of people, of the green and of the blue, I said we need to go beyond and see it's not just around the crown that the galaxy will manifest, it will manifest beyond and even on the inner side. So I have gone ahead with really very basic urban design forms, which are talking about a face which is more public space where people can move about, and secondary public, semi-public facilities can come over, and pathways that go beyond through those. And they have a face which is more private, and there we talk about water conservation and more private space, that there are, the built faces have their own character, one of them that allows the movement of public, the other side or the third side which has, expression of silence and privacy, both. So we try to put these together and make a kind of a fabric. And this is a fabric of green, blue walkways, and what I'm terming as the red. That is a public space, it's just to give it a color which is, fun color. So let's have our plotting beyond these, so that the greens and the blues and the reds are common spaces, including this cafe. So yeah, these are kind of spaces we have thought across the library. This is the existing library building. This is semi-covered space. On the ground floor, we will have book reading and other related activities, more quiet and silent. There are exhibition spaces here, installations. So these are the spaces to read. These are art, interactive art, and installations, because here in Auroville, when we talk about values of courage, of transparency, of togetherness, we have issues which are burning and which we care about, and we need to have spaces to put them up, discuss them, and talk around them, because we are here to, look at it, be honest about it, humble about it, and, find ways to work further on it. And space is the bazaar that I mentioned, which would be, looking different at different times. And yeah, more of the art spaces, which I've talked about before, ephemeral art. And one more idea that came up for this cafe over here, that if we have a cafe, the street is below, and this is part of the cafe. It's possible, connective spaces can be fun, can be differently thought out. And yes, the conservation of water. So we had talked about crown as a bund, and that means that we are not just holding water at the crown and flooding it. We have, the water has been conserved, and as per the experts, in different parts, connected through. One of them is crown as a bund, and then of course it's beyond the crown as well. And at times it is made, possible to feel. And then we were thinking here, and I've changed that, Marie. So I've changed the footprint here to accommodate kind of built spaces which can be more for the green, pro-green, and talking about water harvesting and so on, in the cultural zone, in the green, in the park area. And then we were thinking this is an unpaved space, and we were thinking that we could have a circle of trees and we pass through it. So that when we are passing through the park, yes, we have trees around, but there is part where it's open and the trees are holding us, and let us understand this, that the trees are holding us, literally so, and an experience of that. And this is without the built areas, the green, blue, and the red, and the places for impromptu pani puri, dosas, chais, and also the seating. We could not mark it separately, the seating, because I was told it's very important to think of seating from at different spaces. And then I was asked by one of the participants, by one of the residents, of when we are talking of a street which is not following a perfect shape of a curve or straight line, what is the rationale behind this, logical? So one of the rationale is, of course, that movement we are thinking of rather than only mobility. This is from DDP Luis Feducci. And it has been proved already that when we have narrower roads, winding roads, automatically the speed is less. And in fact, Luis Feducci, this is a crown in residential zone sector 1 and 2. It's not straight, it is what you see. And then what we did was, because we were stuck with just one area, we said, now let us really take a fresh sheet of paper and put in our ideas, what we have been trying to say. And so we are talking about built spaces which are having mixed land use over here. There is a possibility of tram, and yes, the pedestrians, and it's a shared space, but we have other pedestrian spaces also. There are options. It's not like you have to walk in the middle of the road so that the car becomes slow. No, you can walk wherever you want. And then there are different types of pedestrian spaces at different levels so as to accommodate different activities. Some areas given away only to green and only to blue, of course, and which creates, different, the minimum size we have taken here is 6 meters and it increases. We have also some parking spaces, because if we are talking about cafes, there'll be some parking on the sides. And we are talking here about the relationship of the pathways to the built spaces of the, the areas considered, the dimensions, and of through connections which are shaded connectivity. And also, very important, we know about open, semi-covered, covered, semi-covered, open, but we keep forgetting that. Very important to use semi-covered spaces for internal mobility, walking mobility. And these are just the different types of pavings. And the green and the blue. And what we are saying here is that when we have, when we plot our built spaces now, then when we plot them, we need to have guidelines for porosity. So what kind of porosity are we thinking of? How much of percentage of porosity is required so that the through connectivity is facilitated, the idea of built spaces conversing with the street is facilitated. And then what are the kind of connections that we give, which are built, which are as pathways, which are semi-covered spaces, which are the common spaces which the two plots will have to, put together so that it's a larger common space to be used, so that when we are working on one plot, we are not working in an isolated way. We are at the same time thinking of the plot next to us, because only then we will be able to work with the connectivity, the envisioned connectivity. And then the building materials, because if we are having concrete jungles, it's not because concrete is the best element, it's because it is the cheapest and the builder can make the most money. So if we are saying that we don't want to do concrete, we want to try different materials. If we are saying that we want to have connectivity across, shaded pathways, bridges across, then these require funding, and the funding that we get should be accommodated for these kind of things, so that the conventional built buildings will not have a reason to be conventional anymore. Then we will have support for the vision that we hold. And we have worked out the areas here because I feel finally it is the plotting that is important and the urban design features and the water and soil conservation guidelines that have to come with every plot as well, of what kind of water conservation, where, how much, and so on and so forth. And yes, space for impromptu activities to unfold. That should be not plotted. A close-up of this, I think sufficiently you can see that there are different types of mobilities possible, and that it's a shared space with ample walking around and through. And these are some areas we have worked out, and the population in this given diagram. Harita, you want to say something about it? Or it's okay, we go on. If anybody's interested, we can explain. And then this is one more option we have done, because not only built spaces need to be connected and given here, there can be different other activities that we envision around the crown be given, and they also form the part of the connected fabric. And here now we have again worked with connecting across. So at parts the crown road or street, if I may say, is wide. At parts it is narrow, both for a reason, both giving different chances and different opportunities and different environment for us to experience different connectivities, connectivity through, and yeah, close up of the same. And I mean, why so many urban design guidelines? Why? It is because somewhere in being the modern people that we are, we have forgotten that every line has a meaning, which the architects used to know before. And when they drew a line, it had a meaning to it. It had interconnectivity thought of beforehand. It had various layers. Already in one sketch, there would be layers of thought put in. And this is what we need to bring back, and therefore the guidelines. And to be really aware that the edges that we have hold a meaning in the way they are porous, in the way they are folding into each other or opening out, and the way they fold in give us different opportunities of spaces and usages, and that the hierarchy and scale of the spaces is something that we need to remember even if we are working on a small plot, because it is part of a whole, and we need to have that in our consciousness. And having said that, I come back to the last 2-3 slides, which I was told I should present again today, of having art as a forerunner in our minds when we are designing. Because if we say we want to make a circle, and even our Vastu Shastra expert has said that whether it's a circle or it's an organic shape, it has actually the same impact in Vastu Shastra. So what is a circle, and what are the elements that go into making a circle? And can we try out different possibilities and different scales and different lines of the circle so that cohesively it is, or maybe circular in shape if that is what we wish. And thank you, that's it for today. Come, Jitesh.
So I come from this city called Chandigarh. I'm sure many of you know what it is about. And with that, I would like to sort of introduce this sort of famous adage, map is not the territory. I'm sure you've heard about it. So what is a map and what is a territory? So map is essentially a concept, an idea. It could be a word, it could be, a diagram. And what is a territory? Territory is basically, the land, the water, the people, the lived reality. And Chandigarh is, in a way, the map is the territory there, because it's so literal. I mean, Corbusier and Nehru, when they were designing it, they were very sure. They were too sure. They kind of almost it's so top down that there's hardly any presence of people, the presence of process, presence of change. Of course, it happens. It's happened. It's still happening, but is the plan able to, or is the concept able to hold that? Is really a question. And I think we are here in Auroville, and I think the first time I came to Auroville, I would get lost. Like Chandigarh is like a gridiron. Everything is so predictable, and every time I would come here, it will take me like years to actually kind of remember the ways, because it was so windy. There's forests, you don't know where you are. So it was like a fascination, for this kind of a place. So that's kind of the territory of the place. That's what you have. That's the lived reality. However it is unfolding. At the same time, we have this map. A very strong. In a way, if you look at this model, it's a literal model. If somebody wants to take it literally, it's concrete and green and blue and whatever, you can build it. You can build it as it is. But do we want to do that? Do we want to go beyond the map in the sense, what is it the idea? Today, Marie and Neha were talking about the parks, the 4 parks, and the values. What does it represent? What does it really represent? Can we get kind of deeper into that? And see what it reveals. For us. When we are looking at, really trying to bring that map on the territory in a way. So I believe we always meet somewhere in between. It's never either the map or the territory. It's always something in between, and that's the wonderful process. I think that's the nature of, in a way, a good lived city. So if we want to do that, how do we go about planning? How do we really build infrastructure? How we do build road? How we take the next steps? I mean, it's a wonderful, this dream weaving, I guess, is kind of a process. It's not, I don't see it as I think probably it's going to be an ongoing process for whoever wants to participate in it, because, I mean, planning is a continuous process. It's not going to, end here and we're going to arrive at answers. But some of the questions or some of these kinds of insights, that we've collectively got, or some of them, have been shared, are kind of worth noting. I feel, the fact that we're looking at the crown here, and I kind of overlaid it, Marie's and Ganesh and Neha's, and then the topography, and we start seeing basically. The need, for example, for the blue-green, looking at the, like in this diagram, Neha and Ganesh, what they were trying to do is they're seeing the negative of the galaxy, as a positive. They're looking at it as something that could kind of pre-exist in a way, and that doesn't necessarily come from just the form of it. I feel it can come from the from our experiences with water, with how the slopes are working, where the trees are, all that. So and also the diagram, the diagram of the galaxy, what it's doing and what it's doing, in terms of how it's intersecting with those. Does it make sense to actually translate it like that or deviate from it. So I looked at, this Marie's diagram also was fascinating, where the crown, can obviously, we all have kind of understood that it doesn't need to be the same width, so it can change in different zones. So I kind of looked at the Dharkli area and the industrial zone. It's still like a lot of exploratory, it's like an exploratory process. So there, actually, I just have a couple of sketches that I'll share and just go back and forth. So zooming in, sorry. So I was looking at these areas, basically trying to draw what is there, in terms of pathways, in terms of canyons, in terms of the trees. And seeing what are the possibilities, of whatever we've been talking about, where we're saying, for example, this definitely, the line of life is a wonderful idea because it's already sitting in the canyon, and one could have like this series of kunds, maybe tree houses or something, fabric that still has some remnants, some kind of some resonance with the galaxy, but doesn't have to be literally that. So this was a challenging thing that we tried to take on, in the sense, how can we build this, let's say, this intersection? It came from this intersection where the crown obviously thins out here, and we're looking at it as as something that obviously, wherever it needs to widen, it widens, but wherever it needs to be thinner and just allowing the water to flow or the silt to flow through it. But this junction became something that I'll talk about it a little later. But so these are some of the images. We were talking about this area today. I think Ganesh kind of was saying this could be a bridge, and then there could be whatever. We don't need to build this right now. Obviously, we don't. But what could be the vision for it? So I was looking at it as a lot of these sort of villages that are built on the stilts all world over. Where the similar kind of prerequisites of the water, or letting the floods kind of happen through it. But what I'm trying to do here with the crown here is to actually have it as a kind of a porous, positive mass, which allows for that percolation. It can also, we were talking about, through the last discussion with the infrastructure consultants, we could have a walk-in, like a duct that one can walk into, which can be integrated within this. Sorry, they're faded out, but this is more like this area, looking at it from here. Some of the cross sections we've been thinking of what this could be, and it could have a lot of character. This built landscape. It could have gabions, could have eventually moss growing, or things growing. It really becomes a solid mass, which can allow for this porosity. We could also maybe cantilever a bit of it. So there are different possibilities. So this cross-section, once again, looking at how we can negotiate that corner or that intersection with the raised crown, and these are different levels that one could enter into from the crown itself. And then, like through these widened areas, one could enter the the line of force and create this very interesting urban form here. So here we are kind of thinking of these as structural, either the structures, the services, all could kind of happen through these cores which are coming down. So it's like stilts. Basically, everything is on stilts, but allowing for the forest to weave in and so this is like the area in between the two lines of forces. So this could, like what we've been talking about, what Shelja also just presented. I mean, this is very doable, I feel, you know, where we have a character which we can, in a way, define like how much areas, let's say in terms of percentages that we allow it to be really close to the ground. So we could create sort of these zones almost, you know, and have that character emerge. This is like some diagrams of what, how we are kind of looking at the form of the line of force itself. I mean, there's an intern who's working on this. He just came up with this, so I thought I'll share. This I've already talked. Some examples of, you know, what could happen with, you know, these raised edge. Just a couple of more slides, you know, where this is a project that we are working on, which is in Abohar, where we are looking at the blue-green infrastructure, inserting it into the city. It's a small town, which there was this old waterworks.
Jitesh, you have 2 minutes to finish up.
So we are basically trying to connect, you know, the water here. You know, we're trying to, like here, there was an existing tank. This was old waterworks. They had these huge underground tanks. So we thought, let's build around it and let's use it for retention. And all these bioswales around the stadium. Which now there's a bigger lake, and then all this basically is connected. So there's a whole park that can submerge. That's like you can collect the water in the rainy season, and it can be used during the dry seasons. So this is that park. This is the Bauli we're trying to create with the existing infrastructure, existing water tank, something like this. So what I'm saying is it's water, and the blue-green infrastructure could become, you know, the key to this question, to this kind of, at least at this stage, you know, how do we sort of lay it out so other things can plug into it? Thank you.
Thank you, Shailaja and Jitesh. So we are running a little behind schedule, but we have time for a quick Q&A round. So if Shailaja, Jitesh, and Raj want to come back on stage, we can have one quick round of questions.
So my question is to you, Shailaja. Because the stretch, I remember what I could see is like you have made the stretch from Solar Kitchen to Arca, right? Yeah. Where it meanders and goes. So I'm quite curious to see what made you to meander, because you had quoted Feducci, and Feducci had a different way of meandering than what you had proposed. Yeah. And if you see, I think Henry's one of the presentation, you could actually see there's a clear sketch of Roger, in which, like, you know, it's a circle of the same stretch, where he has detailed quite exhaustively that sketch, where you could see even the shuttles and cyclists plying. And in the crown buildings, which is on the inner side, in between you could also see the street of the crown in Roger's sketch. Because I'm sure also, I'm thankful that you quoted Doshiji's sketch, where you say, like, you know, architects, for every line, there's a meaning. I'm sure, like, you know, so if Roger has made such a detailed sketch, he also had a meaning. So after all these things, why do we need to deviate? Because I also find this little contradicting the design brief also given to you. So that's my question. Thank you.
We have one more question. Anybody? Okay, then.
Yeah, so I have worked with Roger on one of the building projects that we are doing, and I've actually seen how flexible he was with the interpretations of his lines. And he has actually, I mean, I've worked with him and I've been with him, and people were telling me that he's very rigid and his lines are like this and like that, but he actually was talking of essence. And the interpretation was left to us so long as the essence was not lost. And that is the presumption I have worked with. And the second reason why we have made that meandering was also following Helmut's mobility presentation, where he said that, you know, there are different ways of making mobility which is slower, where the cars have or you know, what he was saying as, you know, the armored vehicles have a secondary preference because the preference is given in a shared space to another. And also because Roget's galaxy has connections across. And the moment you take a particular width of a road and continue it in a straight fashion, that connectivity becomes forced and not natural. And taking all these factors into account, we felt that this kind of movement would actually enrich what Roget has done and not deviate from it. So I'm actually very, very respectful of Roget's work, because, you know, Galaxy is also part of my dream, and I'm totally pro-Galaxy. And I feel that if we go into the you know, the sensibility of it, then a lot is possible and the Galaxy can manifest. But I also feel at the same, because I actually started first by drawing the Galaxy footprint of the crown. And then as input started coming, I started realizing that no, I need to rethink of what these lines are saying, because although I respect them so much, they actually are holding keys in them and I need to unlock them. And this is a process of unlocking where I've reached. It is very intuitive and I can only logically explain it like this.
Thank you, Shailajan. Thank you, architects.
Yes, a big thank you to all the architects for doing this amazing work and for evolving your plans. Before I hand over to David and Mona for a final wrap-up, I will just briefly go through what is planned for tomorrow. So tomorrow is for all the participants to be here, and we will have time for some silence, for some reflection, as well as an open space with all the architects where you can ask questions, have interactions, and also a dedicated time to fill out this form that you got at the beginning of the day. So it's important to bring back this form tomorrow, or if you think you might forget, you can also give it to us and we will bring it back tomorrow. And yes, a big thank you to everyone for being here today and for all the viewers who joined us online. This is the final presentation session of this exercise of Dreamweaving the Crown. And yeah, I'll hand over to David and Mona for a final say.
Okay, so today's the last day where it will be live streamed. So this is partly for people watching on the live stream, but also for everybody here. We'd like to emphasize we've come to the end of this particular dream weaving process. As Aditi mentioned, tomorrow there will be a few bits and pieces to do, but this is the last presentation. But I'd really like to emphasize that this is the end of this, but the beginning, hopefully, of something much larger and long-term. So I think it's important for everybody who's been participating to realize that you've achieved something, that you've reached the end of something, but that we really have to keep in mind that we're really hoping this is the first step in a new direction. And I wrote something else down. Yes. So we had mentioned that there will be another presentation during birthday week. As you may all have come to the same conclusion today, I think everybody's a little bit tired of presentations. That's not just the architects themselves giving the presentations, but people listening to presentations of this type. So what we've been thinking is that we'll actually put together an exhibition of some sort. So we're going to discuss this tomorrow with the architects, with Rajiv and Jaideep, and we're going to see how we do that best. And I think that's going to take a little bit more time, so it'll probably be a couple of weeks, maybe even 3, we don't know. We've got various ideas of where this might be, how this might be. So sort of let's wait and see how that unfolds. But the beauty of that would be that if we do an exhibition, similarly, a little bit like what we've got here today from Roget's sketches, it'll be a much more relaxed atmosphere. People can come, the architects can be standing there with their work. You can have discussion with the architects and things like this. So there won't be that rush. And I will apologize again to the architects for rushing so many of you in ways you were not wishing. But we've had all these different factors to try and balance out and keep to certain times and so forth. So I appreciate your patience. I'm speaking to the architects now, not just the audience. But hopefully this exhibition will provide more space for everybody to get what they need from that. You wanted to add something, Mona?
So we have to also thank all the people who have donated, because this has made really, I mean, this was so touching that as soon as it was put in the news, you know, so many Aurovilians put some money, and then we got something from Auroville International, and so that has all made this possible. And also on a personal note, I want to say, like, it's been quite a process, a grace also, and I think, we've never done this, so we're very grateful that all of you stuck it out, and you know, you are the real people who work, but behind the scenes there was a lot of work. And many times we were asked, why didn't we give feedback? Like, you know, why are you silent? Especially me and David in the last table sessions. But I just felt like we were in such a different space, you know, like it's not possible, like you can't just jump from one space to another. And this time we were in this role. So we hope that we try to do justice to whatever we took up. And I think dreaming is our inherent right. So we shall not stop dreaming. I mean, if not in Auroville, where, you know? So this is not the end, definitely. I think this is just the beginning of many larger things. And many things already we are hoping, which are going to come out of this. So yeah, but tomorrow is still another day, and we hope that it'll be more interactive, and you know, that everybody will come here tomorrow. We hope to have all of you back here. And then we'll discuss with you further in the afternoon. Some of you will be here, and then we'll see. And then maybe Rajiv and Jaideep will have something to say tomorrow. So thank you very much, and see you tomorrow.
And just to mention, tomorrow we have breakfast here at 8:45 a.m. for those joining us. And the sessions will start at 9:30 a.m. All right. Thank you, and see you soon.